I, you look lovely, by the way, both of you. You have a gorgeous sweater and your hair like that. That's the first time I see you. It's a very,
It's move on the go hair, I call it.
That's a librarian look.
On the go. I don't have time to make.
yeah. I thought I'd get it in before we were live.
Now we're live.
Pizza in order of presentation. The capital budget summaries at the back. The operating summaries right after library, because we're going to start with that.
So everything gets started ahead of time. Good morning, members of council. We will call the meeting to order. First.
Moving second here, gonna stop the agenda, please. Councilor Trahan, the draft agenda presented to council for the special meeting dated the 10th day of February be hereby adopted as circulated.
All in favor? All carried. Any declaration of conflict of interest or interest thereof? None. Today we're going to be engaging in the 2025 budget deliberations for the municipality. And Mr. Trustee, may I ask, is the intention potentially to bring it to council tomorrow evening, or what do you view as our timeline?
I would love the budget's passed today. If not, we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to continue deliberations. We would not bring it to council tomorrow night. We would bring the tax rate bylaw to the second meeting in February.
Okay. Thank you so much. So on that note, we will turn it over to you for you to guide us through the day. And thank you for an excellent agenda and binder. Everything is very well organized. So well done.
Thanks to Carrie and Kim for assisting, and Leah. First on the agenda this morning, we've got the East Ferris Public Library Board's operating budget. We've got our CEO, Jennifer Laporte, and our chairperson, I'm not sure if that's what the title is, Chairperson Joyce, from the board. So that's the first presentation this morning. And when you're ready, that's where we'll begin.
So obviously, I would like to thank council for allowing the library to present. And I mention this every year, other jurisdictions don't get the opportunity to present in person. And, you know, from the board and myself, it's appreciated that we're allowed to, you know, converse with you in person and present our budget in person. And so the first page is just a summary of our missions vision statement that is located also in our strategic plan. And it's to create a sustainable, supportive, and collaborative environment that effectively meets the evolving needs of our growing and diverse community. So that's something that the board adopted back in 2024, moving into our, you know, planning cycle of 2024 to 2027. So this is our vision moving into the future. So we'd like to, you know, thank the ongoing support, obviously, of municipal council and staff, municipal staff, because without the collaborative environment and the support, we can't make progress. So the second page of the presentation highlights the progress we've made over the past decade. A lot of, you know, money has been put into the library to improve it along the years. And we'd like to demonstrate what we've been doing over the last decade that gives you a good broad change over time. Active users, but so we compared 2014 to 2024, the decade long, and it shows the total contribution in 2024. The total municipal contribution was $90,000, and then last year we requested the contribution was $203,061. So if you look at the number of users back in 2014, we were about 683 active users. So the difference between a card holder and an active user are, you can have a card, but you can just have a card. But these are numbers that are talking about the people coming in and actively using the collection. I'd like to also point out that active users doesn't include, these are data that's collected through collection circulation, but this doesn't include people who are just visiting the library. So that's something that, you know, over time we've been discussing as a library board. How do we capture traffic? And then we're going to be looking at that as part of our strategic planning, you know, because we're missing data points, people just coming in to hang out. We don't have those numbers. This is only reflective of actual circulation statistics, how many users are taking things out, but not necessarily coming in. So that's just to be mindful of that.
Bookstore just,
Anything that is barcoded. So it could be books. So back in 2014, if you look on that column, we didn't have a library of things back then. And so we didn't have any sports equipment. We didn't have park passes. We didn't have all the other interesting things that we've been adding over the years. So back then we had, what we still do, books, DVDs, we had audiobooks, we had Kobo e-readers, which we still have. So those numbers are reflective of what's been, what people were taking out in those items, including books. 2024, we're up to 1,063, which is very close to 20% of the residents. So it's pretty good. It's very close to that. I think it's about 21 or about 19 and change. So that's awesome. And these are people who are actively using our materials. Interlibrary loan is what we're requesting from other libraries. So when we lack a title, we request it from another library. So those two numbers show that it's going up. So we're promoting it as well. Hey, if we don't have what you need, we can get it. And it's free, right? It's free for the user. Interlibrary loan lending out is when we are extending our collection to other libraries. And if you remark that in 2024, we didn't offer that service. We just didn't do it. We weren't equipped. We didn't have enough staff. We couldn't do it. So 2024, we're now lending our collection out. Internet connectivity is the biggest, one of the biggest accomplishments. In 2024, we were operating at 5 megabytes per second download speed. And if anybody's ever had to try to do things with 5 download, you can't. And with the like Jason, the CAO did an amazing job helping us get a proper cable to the library. And that was part of the contract we signed. And then the CAO also helped us out with that to push a little harder to get that cable put in. And now we're at 50 on average. And that's spectacular. It's awesome. One-on-one tech help. It wasn't offered in 2014. We didn't have a person. We didn't have a person to offer it. Now we do. We didn't have an online catalog. People didn't have any idea what we had in our catalog without coming into the library. And we since have one now. Library of Things. It contains numerous interesting items that patrons can check out for free. We have binoculars, we have knitting looms, a projector, ice fishing gear, puzzles, and so much more. I think we're up to 21 different items in our Library of Things that are non-book items. Sports equipment, I wanted to highlight that. We didn't have that, and now we're up to 71 items. And these were obtained, a lot of our sports equipment were obtained through partnerships with the ski club and partnerships with the recreation department at the municipality. So we worked together to procure more equipment to be able to lend out. And I noticed that this tennis court outside the library has a nice little sign that says, hey, if you're looking for equipment, you can rent it out of the library, go to the library. So there's a collaborative cross promotion there. Park passes, we have 3 of them. So these are free commercial park passes that people can take out and go to any Ontario provincial park. Dedicated library program coordinator, we didn't have one in 2014, and now we do. And that's massive. And that's through the investment in the library to augment. And then obviously our annual program attendance has gone up, from 301 in 2014 to 1,230. So this is just a highlight of, an overall highlight of, what are we doing with the money you're giving us, right? And I also want to point, it does include the stories. Like there are a lot of stories that, the one that really touched me in the last year is we have an individual that came in that was recently retired and finding it tricky to make ends meet and had to book a tech appointment to come in and work on a resume, and was very, it was humbling, and I was very honored to be able to help this individual to get a resume and get back out and get a part-time job because they just couldn't make ends meet. And then there's also those stories of, people who are going through terrible divorce, and it's a reality in our community, and they come in and they can't use the internet and they don't have a car and their lawyers requiring documents. And how do we help these individuals? So there's just some of the little stories And also the little babies that, we're the first people that sometimes the mothers take the little babies to visit out in public, to story times, or, we see them come in a little carriage and all of a sudden they're talking to us and handing us little books. So it just happens overnight. And those are the people stories, right? And the people stories we don't capture in the data. And you're getting people at the worst times of their life because they're coming in because they have to fax something out because a relative passed away. And they're barely able to talk to you, or you're getting them at the best time, or they're lonely and you're the first person they saw all week. So I just want to highlight those people stories too, right? And I'm just gonna other accomplishments, doubled, these are just the other little things that we've accomplished over the years. We've doubled our newsletter outreach to just over 1,600 households twice a year. So that was part of an increase in our budget that allowed us to reach out to non-users twice a year instead of once a year. And that's massive to us. Increased our public seating by 100%, added 32 square feet of workspace, and we created a quiet space this year so people can come in and Zoom. And we've had people where the internet goes down at their house and they're frantic and they're running to the library to be able to continue working, right? They go into our quiet space and they can continue with their meeting. And I mean, it happens numerous times and we track those data points. The Trillium funding as well required a partnership with the municipality because we're not able to apply to that funding unless we use the portal that you have. So we can't do that, right? So that's a partnership. Increased accessibility, of course. The offering of a free booth at the municipal trade show, which allows us to outreach right in the center of everybody. And it's great. And it's offered to us for free. And also the free access of the ice surface for community, the flea market to allow us to fundraise. And recently a dedicated space for artisans and artists. So the last half of the budget presentation just highlights where we're headed, and you can find our entire strategic plan on our website if you so go look at it. And if you have any questions, you can contact one of us about it. But these are just I won't go through it, but it's just showing our priorities. Community engagement, library spaces, digital infrastructure and collections, and community development. So what this just highlights is the money that we're given, we have a plan with it, and it's out for everybody to see, and it's transparent and it's productive and it's measured. So we're not just kind of flying blind with what we're given. So it outlines where we're headed, and we have a good supportive board too. Oh, anything you'd like to add? Sorry.
I'm just going to say there's any number of things that are coming up you might want to come to. The two that I'm involved with, if you ever want a really good meal, you come to the Cookbook Book Club. I've never eaten as well in North Bay as I have when people bring in the food. And the other one is I challenge you all to a game of Settlers of Catan on the 20th, because we're going to be learning this board game, which I'm slightly addicted to.
What's it called?
Settlers of Catan. It's a gateway game. I will warn you, it leads to an entire addiction of board games you may get into.
Yeah. Are there any questions about this? Well, before we head into the financial portion? Any questions? Oh, anything? Okay. So on the last page, on the back page of the presentation, outlines our requests for 2025. And I included the summary line by line of our revenue sources. So the first graph that you're seeing is the line by line budget items for revenue. And you'll see our operating grant is in there, a student employment grant. Normally we chose this year, we don't know at the time of budget whether we are going to be successful or not. So that's always, we're not sure. But in past, we've been very, very successful, and it's been very fortunate we are, because some libraries, there was a run where they just weren't getting their students, and then that affects your programs. New to this year is we've invested a little bit of the money to start generating a little bit of interest from there. So that's a new line item. cost recovery, what cost recovery implies is we receive money from either Ontario Library Service to cover the cost of postage for interlibrary loans. And it also includes anything that needs to be replaced in the sense of money earned when we sell stuff like coffee or pop. So it's kind of a cost recovery, or if people destroy books or we need to replace it. So the cost recovery is kind of one in, one out type of thing. It always is. Usually it bounces right out. Non-resident fees charged to obviously are anybody from outside of the municipality who doesn't pay taxes have to pay a non-resident fee. This includes an agreement we have with the Township of Chisholm. So their residents can come to the municipal library, our library, and request a library card. And then we invoice Chisholm at the end of the year for those users. So that's a decent source of revenue for us. And we get quite a few. I can't remember the exact numbers exactly, but there's about $900 worth of membership, non-resident fees there. Book sales, of course, are fundraising events and outreach and in the library. Programming registration fees. And you'll notice, you'll probably be wondering, okay, 2024 actuals were quite high. And why are we only budgeting 500 for this year? The board felt that part of 2024, we were charging for our program fee, a set fee. And the board felt that this was a barrier to accessibility, a barrier for some people. So we have since changed our policy and now all our programs are free to everybody. So that's why there's a difference there.
Just to clarify, they're actually by donation.
Correct, yes,
If people would like to
correct,
donate,
yes,
they are more than encouraged, but
yes.
if there's that person who does not have the money to attend, it's not a barrier.
Right, yes, we do encourage a donation, but we don't require a set price to attend. So that's why the number has changed. Fundraising revenue, our major fundraising event is the flea market that will be taking place on May 3rd. And we started it back up. Last year was the first year after a little hiatus with the pandemic and various pauses. So that's our major fundraising event. And we usually bring about 1,500 a year into that. And it's from table sales. Workshop registration fees. We're experimenting with that line. The difference between program and workshop, program registration fees are programs that occur in-house and they are facilitated by our staff. Whereas workshop registration fees are facilitated by somebody, either a volunteer or a person who comes in on an honorarium. And then we'll charge accordingly. So that's kind of, the board felt we needed to keep those separate just to keep track of it. Like, is it in-house or is it, donations, we received quite a bit of donations last year. Yeah, it was pretty good. A substantial amount came from the Carnival Committee. We received $2,000 from the Carnival Committee. So that was a big portion of donations. And the rest are collected through, in-house boxes. We have a box that the Astorville Fresh Mart lets us keep there. And we take money out of that every so often and it fills up. So there's a little bit there and just generosity of people around us. It also includes our CanadaHelps.org donations and checks that are received throughout the year from people. And usually when we receive a check donation from the general public, it's usually no less than $100. And they receive a tax receipt because, as you're aware, we're a registered charity. So total revenue for this year, we are budgeting, you'll see on the left or the most right column what we're budgeting for this year. And then we're anticipating a total revenue of $15,124.67. We are going to be pulling from our tech reserves to purchase some computer equipment. And we are going to use our surplus from last year to offset the ask for this year to assist council. So at the end of the day, if you go to one contribution from general fund, and then the additional contribution that we're requesting for 2025 will be $6,046.37 for this year. to balance out our budget, which brings it at 3.8. And the column on the bottom, the little sheet on the bottom just kind of outlines where our increases are found. So you'll notice our core operating, like books, cataloging, and that type of thing hasn't changed much at all. Where we're looking at our salaries and benefits to be in compliance with the pay grid. And we also are including, because of, we're including an extra, changing our operating hours to 1/2 hour per day, 4 days a week to serve our public better. We're finding it's just difficult to get all the hours in, and it'll allow us to serve our public better for open a little bit earlier. The majority of our users are over 65 plus, the majority of our resident or our patrons. So this will benefit them in a lot of ways. And it'll also add a little bit more time to complete tasks that some of our staff are finding challenges to complete in the time that they're allowed. So it allows them a little extra half hour. So do you have anything you want to contribute on that, Joyce?
My experience, for example, a lot of us slightly older people tend to be earlier in the morning. So the idea is to open a little earlier so that the people who tend to go to sleep at 7 at night, not that's me, can get to the library within the time frame of their day.
Yeah, our current hours in the winter are from 11:30 to 6:30. So this would include a shift, or not a shift, but an increase of 1/2 hour. So we would start at 11 to 7. So we'd be open an entire 8-hour day and allow residents to come in and serve them better, basically. I put a little sign at the door. Did you come here and you missed us? And it allows them just to tick off little ticks and put the time. So I have little time slots. And a lot of people are showing up at 10 or 10:30 and you see a lot of ticks. So it was a way to find out who's coming to the door and it's closed. So that data we felt that, yeah, we're going to shift it over. In the summer, we do shift a little earlier because in the summer, as you know, things dwindle off after supper. So we did found our summer stats in the morning are quite high. So this will allow us to just tweak it and obviously allow us another half hour in the day to allow our staff to complete their tasks and not stay later. Any questions about that? It's very straightforward.
Just,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't have a question. I just, you just want to go back. You said your majority of your customers are 65 plus,
25%.
25%.
Yeah, well, not majority.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah.
25% of our
25%.
residents in the township are.
Yes.
Oh, wow, that's high.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Where's the kids?
Yeah. Well,
A fair number of smaller people who come to.
60, I think we had the data we had is 85% are, 20. Yeah. So we have a chunk that's 65 plus, and the next chunk under that are boys under the age of 12. Those two groups make up the majority.
Which is fine. It's just what you said. I was a little
Yes. Yes. Thank you for.
touched on that.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Just so you know that we're listening.
Yes, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Good questions, comments?
Yeah. any comments?
Back to the student grants. Now that doesn't show up there, what happens at the end when you do get the grant? That money goes into reserve or how does it show up?
What it does is it comes out as an expense. So money in and money out. So it nets out to zero. So when we were successful, we received yes, you are successful in that grant. I recalculate the staff sheet to include the student. So that money goes out in payroll. Yeah. Well, actually, it's a different line item. I think.
Basically, student grants are 100% covered
Correct.
for
Yes.
payroll costs. So if we get 5, we spend 5.
Yeah.
And it's not a given right now because I'm not even sure applications have closed. They have.
We applied for the federal grant, and since we are a registered charity, we receive 100% of the payroll costs. If we weren't, I believe it was 80%. So for us, a federal grant would cover 100% of the student wages.
You never know at budget time unless we're later in budget, whether we're approved or not. It's too soon.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I understand what Councillor Champagne is asking is in 203,
Yeah.
the 4,000 is included in it. It's part of,
Yes,
Actual.
yes.
correct. Yes.
The budget, 2025 budget to So if we were fortunate to get the grant in this year, it could mean a reduced need in a sense, right? $2,000, maybe, or 1,000. something
No, because we didn't budget for the student.
We didn't budget for a student, correct?
It's just the way it looks there is that you don't get it, but then when you do get it, where does the money go?
Yes.
Like you don't know, you're asking for a bigger budget, but it's,
Yeah, so if you look next to the $4,824 under the 2025 budget, it says zero.
yeah.
If we're approved for 5,000, you'll see 5,000. But in the bottom part, where the expenses are, salaries and benefits, that's gonna go up by 5,000.
It will.
It's an in and out.
Okay.
They net each other out. Because we're 100% funded. So we've not included student money in here yet.
Correct.
Confusing.
Why?
No, it's just confusing the way it's written down, the way I'm trying to figure it out, that's all.
Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, the actuals, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's basically, so I guess you could do, if we were successful, then our total revenue would be, 15,000 plus 4,000 and change would be the actual total revenue for 2025. And then the bottom expenses would go up by the equal amount. So they would net out to zero if we're successful. So it's not reflective in this budget.
What we could do is maybe put in the line student salaries
Yeah.
and say zero and then.
Yeah, that's something we can do for next year to clarify it. Yeah, I mean, we're staring at this all the time and I'm sympathetic that it's not something you're staring every day. So yeah, but we, as soon as we get the check, the expected expenses will adjust for that exact amount of revenue.
Okay, good question. So good
Yes.
clarification. Thank you for that.
Well, one thing for council as well, when the budget was finalized, we were sitting around close to 7. I believe it was 6.95, I think is what it was. And the discussion at the board level was, it's probably not palatable for council. At that point, we're, I think, around 10,500 or something like that additional ask. So what the board's done is use 4,500 from surplus to bring the ask down to 6,000, to bring it to 3.8% increase. Now, because you can see from payroll salaries and benefits, it is up almost $20,000. Now, the only change was an additional 2 hours basically for a staff member per week. But it's pay equity is what's driving everything. A lot of the staff, when we did pay equity, started at step 1 of the grid. There's one position or two that started at step 2. And it's a 6-step grid. So we're gonna see increases in payroll for the next still, roughly 4 years. So what the board did at that time was to kind of cushion the blow, they used up some surplus. We're gonna see what happens next year. There might be a need to use a little bit as well. Just depends on things fall for next year.
Any further questions or comments?
Well, just that, sorry.
Go ahead with Deputy Mayor. And Councillor Canal.
The surplus, is really to fund, I think, the extra hours that we're gonna work for a year and see and collect data about. So that was one thing. The other thing I just wanted to mention is I was at the Wassy Ski Moonlight
Yes.
Snowshoe.
and ski. And, a young family came in and they had all rented their snowshoes to go, right? So this was it was kind of a neat conversation we had that they were able to try snowshoeing and have this experience with their kids. So
I know who that was. I knew who that was. Yeah, it's and I mean, it's also a group effort, the municipality has the link to our website on their website, and new families coming in are looking, hey, what's available? And wow, there's a link right there, right from the website, and it just links up to us, and then it opens up a whole possibility. And I mean, there's the younger generation. I mean, I kind of straddled two camps where, pre-internet and post-internet, but the newer generation are coming in, the younger families, and they go instantly to the web pages. Municipality newsletters. I'm a new resident now. What's available? And they start clicking through, and I'm just, it's appreciative that you are aware that link is good. It's good to us. It generates traffic. And we see it. We see, I mean, our usage and our internet clicking is, we presented that at the last board meeting in my CEO report that you have access to, how much traffic our site is generating. And this is amazing, and it's a new frontier. So It's a group effort. We can't do it alone. I can't do it in a bubble. Joyce can't do it in a bubble, cancel. If we're doing this, we're just making our space better and helping us all. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I just get clarity.
Yep.
And I just see the numbers and I'm like, we'll go to the non-residence fees. You have 700 for your 2024 budgeted. You got 245 for your actuals. And then 950 for the 2025. I know you said you got into an agreement with outside community.
I can answer that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. The check went as of the actuals of January
It
3rd.
just seems a little,
We hadn't received the check from Chisholm yet. So I do have it on my desk. So when this was produced, when Jason put the numbers in, we hadn't received the check from,
but you knew the number.
it wasn't an actual revenue. So in 2025, that includes the potential revenue from Chisholm Township. So when the actuals were produced on the 3rd, I hadn't received the check. So, if that's a reflective actuals, it's not in my hand. It's an agreement that council passed. Maybe Chisholm might have said, you know what, that's too high. We're just going to amend our resolution and not pay them. We're not in I shouldn't say it's a contract, it's a resolution from council. So from their council. So there's a potential that they could have just changed that. We don't actually have a written contract. It's kind of go ahead.
I'll just mention as well, we produced this, the board can have a January meeting for budget, and then if need be, have a February meeting, which we ended up having a special meeting to get budget out of the way. The library's audit's not till February 27th, which is where the actions be set in stone. So those are the actions as of that date. There might be slight changes. There's not going to be anything material. Like, it's not like we're missing 5,000, 10,000.
Oh, no, yes. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, you look at the numbers, it's a little
Yeah.
disproportionate.
Yeah.
It's a little,
Like 200.
so if somebody asked me a question about that, I'd be like, yeah, it doesn't look good.
No.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. And thanks for the clarity. If there's nobody else has a question, I got a
Continue.
follow-up question. So as you know, this year is going to be tough. Yeah, as you've probably read, one media person's captured the same comment that I've said, because it's going to be a tough year. Next year is going to be even tougher. If you had to help out, where can you help out in your budget for the municipality?
So this year, after our budget deliberations that we had at the board level, the library staff and I have increased user fees. So we went through, okay, how long has it been since we increased our fees? So we increased our user fees for services that we felt were going to generate. I think we can generate another $2,000 with increased user fees in a fair way to the public. That's a rough estimate, and we didn't want to increase them drastically across the board. So we picked a few that were, tolerable to the public itself. You can't just all of a sudden, oh, everything's doubled. And it's like, okay, well, everything is doubling, but we tried to ease it in. So increased user fees for our different services, and we also increased our non-resident fee. So that was a little bit in the transition on this budget. So we are anticipating, but it's all dependent on how many people renew. I can predict there will be this many people renewing, but it might not be that way. So there's always a plus or minus, 20 to 30%, because I'm not sure for non-resident fees, it's a prediction. About 20%, I would say, fluctuate. So yeah, increasing user fees. If it gets to, there are ways we can figure it out. User fees is probably the best way. We may have to revisit charging for programs, but that's at the board's decision. We might have to change our policies and start charging for programs, but.
I'll just also point out something that Lauren alluded to. The extra hours for staff are being done on a trial basis for a year. Should that not work for us? Should it not give us the extra traffic that we anticipate? That is being done on a trial basis.
And let me extend this, just being fair.
Yeah.
This question is going to be asked to every manager and every department. So it's not a specific
No, I
And I'll
appreciate
ask the
that.
questions To everybody,
Yeah.
because there's, like I said, there's gonna be some tough times here. And the increase is just looking up. It's gonna be tough. So I just want to, you said user fees increase of approximately 2,000, then you may increase non-resident fees to whatever, but there's nothing you're gonna take out. So it's possible increases, not decreases
Well-
to your budget.
Yeah, taking out, I mean, and I can present the requests.
Am I saying that right? Am I okay with that? Like, what I'm asking?
Yeah, Council Champagne's looking to see if there's reduction in expenses versus increase in revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you, something,
Oh, sorry.
there's a bunch, there's a spreadsheet out there that I can provide to you and I.
I'm just asking. I'm pretty sure that managers and everything are gonna come with a bit of a game plan that, because you've got council here that's snatched something, right?
Meeting the budget level, we had a spreadsheet that showed increases over time for things I can control. So books, cataloging, and we can produce that and send it to you. So if you look at, 2014's request for books versus 10 years later, the change is gone down. We've been shaving. So if you look over like the last, 15 years of book budget, it doesn't fluctuate at all. So we have been trimming. So the good part is we have been trimming to the most lean we can be
All right.
over the
Okay.
years.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean.
I'm just asking the question.
Yes,
I'll just give an example. If you have a book that you've recently read and don't plan on reading again and you donate it, Jennifer's staff will take a really good look at it and it may end up on our shelves and that helps reduce our book budget as well.
Correct.
Or we may end up saying, no, we have 15 of these and it goes for sale. So definitely it's a way to contribute.
New,
Yeah.
okay?
yeah, we can offset by used books for sure.
More comment, you just kind of. There was lead times, and we remember sitting here for years and years.
Mm.
The library was, clawed to the top and done a great job. And the library, 100%. And the usage is 100% more. Everything's 100%. So all the Councilor Trahan is saying is that, we're looking at, the budgets this year, but please don't take it to heart. You've done a great job. And the staff's done a great job and made it that much better for the municipality. Thank you for that.
Yeah, hold on here for a sec. I didn't mean anything against the library, Councillor Champagne. But I just want to.
Yeah, no, where can we trim? Yeah, yeah.
So it's every
Yeah.
department, every person, just to see where we can, if we had to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what we've also put in place on the staff level is we are really getting deep into more data collection. So looking at our workflows, where can we increase efficiencies with workflows? Where are there wastage? So we're getting, and we had some data points, but now we're getting a little bit deeper into them. So we want to say, okay, this department, I say department because we have programming in front end. Where are there inefficiencies? So in prior years, we didn't get that deep with the data points. So now we're tracking how much time is spent here, how much time is spent on doing this task. And then we can start tweaking it and say, okay, we're spending 20 hours a week doing something we can make more efficient.
To add to that, for example, volunteers, Jennifer's put in place on the front end website, you can sign up to be a volunteer and the entire calendar for when you're coming in to volunteer is being much more automated. So instead of having to spend a lot of time managing volunteer hours, it's a much more efficient system. And we're trying to definitely encourage more volunteers to come in for everything from, would you like to run a program to, would you like to, look at children's books and help organize them because they may have been disorganized the last time the children went through.
Yeah, so as Joyce pointed out, we're leveraging a lot more volunteers to do, I don't want to say mundane because they are mundane, but they're necessary. So shelf reading and putting books away. So if I can use volunteer time and then that frees up my staff to do. So basically what it does is more bang for the buck. So you're giving us X amount of dollars and I'm freeing up staff to augment our programs by that much. Whereas, and volunteers can take out the mundane stuff. So expanding the platform and getting more, usage. So yeah, we've been keeping it lean over the years. And I mean, if it's required, we will dig a little deeper and make it leaner if we need to. And obviously having a good reserve policy in place to tap into that funding if we need, if something breaks down, it's not on council's back to cover the cost of that. We've created it over the years, over the last, 20 years.
So thank you for that. And after you've run over our time a little bit, but it's always the most interesting presentation and you do such a great job. I just have two final questions, if I may. What has been our high for donations? Is 4,000 the most we've ever collected, or has there been a year where we?
I have to go back in time to, yeah.
2023, 11,000.
11, okay,
But
okay, good. That's good, just to give a sense. And the reserves, if, how much, are there in the reserves? If we had to tap, would you be able to go further into your reserves? I know it would cause a financial challenge, but there are reserves there in the event that would enable you to go. You've really worked hard at defining a budget. There's been a lot of work into this budget. We can see that. It's very apparent. I'm just asking
just in the board's perspective, if you look at donations to what we have added additional, it's not something we can do ongoing.
No.
It's the one time so it's like if this year we got $10,000 donations, that would give us extra. But at some point, we may have a grant that requires the library to put some money forward. If we use up all of the reserves, at that point, we'd be having to turn down the grant because we'd have to say, we can't do that matching piece that you need. So it's important maybe to keep a little of our powder dry, and eventually reserves get exhausted very quickly.
But on that note, I think we're good. And I think it's a wonderful presentation, very informative, very well done. Thank you on behalf of council. Thank you very much for this.
Thanks, Joyce.
Actually, to give it one moment and we will move on to our next presentation, Mrs. Racine. We can grab some coffee as we make the waters better. Thanks.
Yeah, I did really well. Yeah.
Merci, Jim.
Good.
Merci.
Okay, so if we turn to our next page after the library, this is our operating budget summary for 2025. I'll quickly go over it because then we're going to get into general government, council's budget, policing budget, and animal control. And our director of public works will join us for public works, environmental services. So on the first page, same sheet we see every year, council's budget, $180,304 in 2024. This year, $179,533. So a decrease of $771. That's a decrease of about 0.4% on the budget. That's the correct one, Councillor Champagne. And it assists the tax levy by reducing it by 0.01%. So basically the same budget from year to year. We were able to do that just because I know who's attending conferences at this point for the year. So I was able to shave down on the training budget to kind of make the budget net zero to last year kind of thing. If I look at general government, there's a $122,000 increase made up of various budgets we're going to get into. It's the largest one that's affecting the tax levy by 1.76%. And then next we've got our fire department. It's going up $11,094 total. So if you look at the net dollar increase budget to budget, it's $11,094. That includes also community emergency management. So the entire budget's up 2.1% for an increase of 0.16% on the levy. Under policing, we're up about $8,544, so 1.5%, and the levies needs to go up 0.12% to accommodate that budget. We will be going through all the budgets like I mentioned. The next section, we've got the building department. It's actually down about $89,000 this year. That's because for the last, for 2023 and 2024, we had 2 staff members. For 2024, Paul has since retired. So we've got quite a bit of savings there. So it's assisting the tax levy by a decrease of 1.28%, which we knew was going to happen anyway. Bylaw is up $33,000 and we'll get into that, 0.48% on the tax levy. Animal control, $430, a small increase of 0.01% for tax levy. Transportation services is up $77,000, but environmental's down about $39,000. Mostly because of the transition, the Blue Box transition that's gonna happen, so it reduces our costs. So it's actually, that budget on its own is gonna assist by 0.56% on the levy, where transportation's up 1.12. When you net them out, you're actually looking at about 0.6, 0.7%. So a pretty small increase to the tax levy this year. When we get into next, facilities and recreation, overall budget's up $29,565, so 3.8%, and 0.43% on the tax levy. And planning's up $16,601, 0.24% tax levy. Economic development is up $19,000, mostly to accommodate the interim economic development officer for this year, 0.28%. So when you look at operating budgets on their own, they're only up 2.74% tax levy increase. So 4% basically across the board. Now we get into levies, which is where the big hits come. ABCs are up 10%, $117,000 for a 3.14% tax levy increase. So when we talk, some years we're passing a 3% budget, like tax levy increase. This year, that's the ABCs are 3.14. We'll get rid of the ABCs now because they're on the list anyway. So if you look first, DSAB's up about $55,000 over last year. So $1,515,000. Castleholm's up $143,000. Now, the biggest increase in there is about $140,000 for the capital levy, which is interest, to assist them with covering construction debt or construction borrowing, I should say.
That's the interest, right?
That's correct. Yep. So first, when they came to council in October, the increase was, they were projecting at about $201,000. Interest rates have gone down at the Bank of Canada, so their interest rates have gone down for borrowing. So it was projected $137,000 was going to be interest this year. I didn't keep it 137. I brought it up to about, let me give you the exact figure. I believe it's 140 or 143.
That's in case the interest rates goes back up again, right?
Well, so I put 143,000 more. It's not a lot of money, but I'm also going off projections that were provided to us from another source. Like the CFO of Castleholm's telling us 137. That comes at 150. I'm short $10,000. But
This will reflect.
everyone's looking at the bottom line of 7.3. I understand that. So I've tightened where I can, uncomfortably, if I had to say, on certain items, like Castleholm is one of them, right? Like DSAB, we know what it is. The levy's been provided to us. The library board's here. The health unit provided us a levy. Those don't change. Castleholm's not provided an operating levy yet, which they're not going to, the increase to the municipal level, there's no increase to the municipal operating levy this year, although tax assessment does change. So when they bill out $3.2 million, our amount could still slightly go up. I budgeted an increase of 1.5%. So there's about $3,000 or $4,000 there. And then the other difference on the 143 is the $140,000 of interest.
Yeah, just to get it straight though, the difference is what they're talking about is that they had money in reserve towards capital. This is interest on the.
So Councillor Chambay, what happened is they budgeted 0.5% for construction interest. They've already blown all their money to cover interest because I believe what the figure was for about a year, it averaged about 5%. So they were short. So they were withdrawing from the reserves to cover interest. Now what they're doing is they're levying us for interest. So when at first we were supposed to be levied when the project was complete and we would be paying for principal and interest like any other loan. What's happening right now is the project's not done. They're borrowing from IO, they're doing advances and they can't cover interest. So they're levying all municipalities and ours. We've budgeted 140. We've been told it's about 137, although the figure about 4 months was 201. So what's the figure? Is it 201? Is it 137? Is it going to be 156? Is it going to, right?
And again, by our choice.
No.
It's got to do with us, but for.
Yeah. When you look at just looking at the 3.14%, like 2% is Castleholm. So on our 7.3, 2 of it is Castleholm. If you want to take off 3, we're sitting at, 4%, a little over 4%, which is respectable for, where we're at with our own budgets. from year to year, it always feels as though we're shaving and cutting our budget, not being able to increase things to cover ABCs, right? 3% tax levy increase just for that is a lot.
It's got nothing to do with the way we run things, is that we have no choice forced into this levy that we don't like.
Yeah. If we look at the next ABC, it's the health unit. It's up about 8,100, so $8,091. The hospital contributions in there for 28,000. We've got this year to pay and next year we're done. So 2 more years of $28,000 and we're done our commitment. That was purposely done at the start of this term of council to adjust. So that was 28,000 for the last 3 years. And the first year we did 27,000 and some change, but we'll be done with that one. The library board, they presented today, they're up $6,047. And then the conservation authority is up $4,721. And that gives us our 217,000. So we've got almost $2.4 million going out the door to the ABCs. When you look at the next line, operating budget plus board levies, we're at 5.88 tax levy increase just with like our budget and theirs. If we go back the page, we're at 2.74, our operating budget. The levies from the ABCs are higher than our operating budgets.
8% basically.
Yeah, and then the next section, if we look at it, OMPF is up 116,000. That helps us this year. We've got supplemental tax revenues have increased by 3,000. We've had some good amounts. Last year's actual was about 87,000. The year before was under, so the average is about the 85. Last year we took 132,000 from reserves. This year I'm projecting not to do that. That's why you have expense, basically an increase of 132 because last year was pulled from reserves. This year what I've done though is I'm add 1% to reserves for fire trucks, and we'll get into that more when we talk about capital. And then the next 2 lines, 423,800 and 710. That's basically, we've got a budget for that. Now, there is some flexibility in the 423,800 figure where last year was 398. So that's an increase of 25, but it's because we've got items in the capital budget that we're cash for. So that's our cash. Last year we had about 400 grand of cash to put towards capital. This year we got 424 is what I've put in. If we cut items that are cash related, we could drop that figure. The 710 is principal interest on debt. So that section's 1.42%. Not a lot of wiggle room except the percent for fire trucks, basically, which could bring it down to 0.42%. We're still looking at 7.31%. The 5.9 you see at the bottom, that's basically last year's budget of 9,411,000 versus 9,963,000. Total operating budget's up 5.9, but the 7.3 is the levy what actually goes on tax bills to the taxpayer. So that's just to explain that the budget's up about 6% and the levy's up 7.3. So that's where we're starting. It's always nice to go through that before we start getting into all the budgets so we can keep an eye on what departments. But like I said, when you look at the levies from council and general government, that like when you start talking 0.16%, 0.12%, 0.01%, there's not a lot to cut right in there. So keep an eye when we go through. $70,000 is a percent. So.
Well, that was a great overview.
Yeah.
Trustee. Did you want to lead us now into
Yes.
individual items? Yes.
So if we go to the next page, gonna get into general government and council. We're about 15, 20 minutes, so we're 15 minutes, I'd say, behind that one. No, it's up to you. Okay, so if we look on the next page, we're starting with council. So for council, like I had said, the budget was up. I'll just go back to the summary and reference that. So the first section for council, there's actually 2 sections. So you're seeing in the 2025 final column is final budget where we're at today. So it's 151,000 and the line underneath is 28,000 for training. Both of those combined give you your 180,000 roughly for the year. So as we go through, the first section all the way down to EHT is set by the council remuneration bylaw. So a small increase over last year. I did reduce the uniform budget down to 5. If you look at the actuals for 2024 was $300. I just want to pick out some of computer hardware at 1,500. That's in case one of the tablets goes or there's some hardware like that needs to be replaced. We want to have some money to cover. That actually covers one tablet, basically, is what's there. Marketing promotion, we've got it at 13,000, which is the same as last year's budget. But if you look at the 2024 actuals, it was about $10,000 more. Now in there, where we put, we had an event for Paul's retirement went in there. So that's why I'm like trying to explain the actuals, why there was an overrun. So we had Paul's event that was in there. We did do a bigger light up the park event for this year in November. And we did purchase additional lights. So that event's in there. Other items that are in there are your Remembrance Day events in there. And then we did Canada Day, which was small, $500. That's in there. So quite a bit in there. The municipal Christmas parties in there, those kinds of things. Some of that will not happen next year, so we're not gonna have to spend hopefully the same on like lighting at the park. I think we've got the lighting that we need. We'll notice later on in recreation, we actually created a line item called community events and we've moved money there. So that's why that 13,000 I'm comfortable with this year. And we'll get into community events once we get into recreation. I think it's a better place for it.
Yes.
I find under council, the events that are like Remembrance Day, council related, basically, or corporate related events should be there, not recreation events. So that's what's actually in that line.
Yeah, that's good.
Memberships, council's aware of that. We passed resolutions in January to approve those. And then donations, we've slightly increased over last year's budget, but if you see 2024 was about 8,300. Now, those aren't donations too much to the, that we're making to the community. Fireworks is there for Carnival. You got about $6,000 of that is fireworks. The rest might be like, the Legion book, $400, smaller things, but it all adds up, right? Under training, I was able to reduce the conference line. And the mileage, the conference line went down and the mileage went up a little bit to accommodate the increase. Mileage is basically dictated by the CRA allowable rates, which is the same for any staff or council members. So that's why the slight increase last year. Now, the budget did go down, a little over $2,000, $2,700, just because we do know who's attending which conferences. Carrie's reached out early this year to find out who's attending, so we pretty much know for the year, and we were able to kind of look at it that way.
So if it is a tight year, can we reduce that expense? Can we say only 2 people are going to AMO?
Council's decision. Now, I would say, so what ends up happening is when we book rooms, the rooms always have, like AMO, the rooms are already booked, it's happening in August. We have to do it so well in advance, right? So what happens as well, usually we just book all 5 council members, then we find out later because it's hard to determine what you're doing 8 months from now. This year we reached out and we know who's going to AMO, right? If we cancel rooms by a certain date, I believe, Carrie, get 100% back, or the minimum is we have to pay 1 night's room. So if somebody was to cancel now, we might still end up paying 1 night's room versus just say 3. The registration, we usually hold off until the early bird dates kind of come into an end because we want to take advantage of that. But if we do cancel those, sometimes there's a $50 or $100 administration charge for canceling a conference, like OGRA will charge it or AMO. So the answer is yes. I mean, if council decides that there'll be less attendance, there's still going to be minimal charge, but yeah.
Could that be calculated? Just, I don't know.
It's about $2,500 to $3,000 a council member for a conference. You got to factor in rooms, meal per diems, travel, and then obviously the conference cost, right? Depending on which conference it is, they range anywhere from $800 to $1,000.
Yeah.
800 to 1,000. And then the rest is kind of expenses. That's why it's depending on.
I'm just thinking.
Like traveling to London's more kilometers than going to Toronto, and then that's different than going to Ottawa. So, it's 72 cents a kilometer there. Rooms tend to be about the same from conference to conference. They range it close to about $280 to $320 a night for a room. So, yeah, I mean, it can be calculated.
How many people are going to AMO?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
And that's okay. It's just something to think about, right? So if we have to tighten,
Did you put in for
I did.
it? I put in for it. Rick put in for it. So there's
One, but counselors.
three.
I think Amo was everyone but Councillor Calvin.
Mary, put in for it.
Yes,
There's four.
No,
It's not hard.
yeah,
no,
no.
no.
It was, yes, everyone except Counselor Kelly.
Mhm.
Phenom is cheaper as well this year because it's in North Bay, so there's no room costs.
Right.
You know, the per diem's at $150 a day versus $200 a day because it's not an overnight, things like that. You save on meals, right? Because you're in hometown.
So let's not make, let's just highlight it for now. And it's a question that's been asked, and as we go back to items, and those are some of the ones we'll discuss. Unless we need, no, so I don't think we need any further calculations. I think you pointed out, we can easily come, okay.
The thing is though, and let's have our hard discussion, because I did say it's gonna be a tough year this year and next year.
Yes,
And I'm not really happy with the increases either. I have no problem, pull my name out of all the remainder conferences. As long as some of your committees and boards you sit on, that you can cut some money out of there and everybody else cut some money so that it shows that we're doing our job.
Right.
I have no problem with that.
so I was just saying, I don't know if we want to discuss it now here in details, but if we do, fine, let's agree that we do it now. Decide on.
Sooner have you with Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, so we'll wait then, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying, maybe have that discussion.
Yes, but I'm just throwing it out there. Like, let's be fair, like.
Yes, good point. So we come back to it. Okay, yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay, so our next section, which is 110, it says elections. We did budget $1,500.
I'm still there, okay.
We budgeted $1,500 for training costs because normally there's sessions that start becoming available at the end of this year because it's election year next year. So we put in a small amount there, which kind of matches what it was 4 years ago. We always put in some money the year before election. It's the only election cost that we've got budgeted for this is $1,500.
Next year's election year.
Correct.
So you'll be, how much is I was looking
We budget between $18,000 and $20,000.
$20,000.
It's about $18,000 for an election as for the last year, but I mean, you're talking, you're always every 4 years.
Right.
So some things do go up, right?
Cause I.
It's easy to budget for elections because you've got your part-time wages, which we can somewhat dictate what the wages are because it's not set anywhere. It's not a remuneration bylaw. It's not pay equity. They're volunteers put their name for it and get paid. So we can kind of control that there. For next year's election as well is that, I know we haven't talked to council yet about it, but we're looking to not have a poll at Four Seasons Club. They're 5 minutes down, well, a minute down the road. I can run there in 2 minutes. The idea would be we've got a big room here now. So we can run it here, advanced polls. We've got the arena. We still have the Coral Park Hall. We would still do the manor, but try to reduce some there. So that also means we need less staffing and there's less money, things like that. So we'll get into that when next year comes, but.
Good observations, yes.
The next section is general government. So basically, my department budgeted 69,800 for revenues. I know you're looking at 220 from last year, but that included the transfer of 132,000 from reserves. So it's if you reduce that from that number, actuals were about 69,000. Now, we did bring in less money on bank account interest in 2024 versus 2023, but rates were higher in 2023. Rates started to come down. So we also, our deposit interest also gets reduced, right? So we didn't bring as much money in. I think I was banking on a somewhat similar year. We also had less bank account balance than we did in a prior year. So that's conservative, $50,000. Investment interest of $12,000. If you look at last year's actuals, they were 13. That was our GICs that we had put aside. Going down the list, the rest kind of stays the same as prior years, not any big increases. The next section is expenses. So general government expenses, you'll see that the salaries are actually down somewhat. All the costs really from salaries all the way down to the OMERS. The payroll costs have decreased for 2025. Reason being, we do have a staff member that's going to be taking a leave, and the replacement that we do have coming in will not be working 5 days a week. It'll be 3 days a week. That was a way I was trying to reduce our impact on the budget this year.
And so the various sick pay, statutory pay, where do they show up?
So what happens when we budget, I just budget a total salary, and then what happens with the actual is it's either in
Great.
salary or
Yeah.
vacation or sick.
Okay,
It just gets divvied out the actuals, yeah. You will, what was tough this year for our department is we did do pay equity. I would say about a third of the positions were at step, like the top step. So that wasn't a big hit on us, but as people move through the grid, there are larger increases, right? So I had to try to counter that this year because I didn't want a huge increase. So I did gap the position. So the person that is leaving on leave this year for a year, what I did is I only budgeted for the months that they're going to be here. And then I've also budgeted for the relief person that's coming in just for the months they're here. What that means, I don't have a full salary in here for someone. That means that next year I'm going to slightly increase it because they're back at a certain time. And then in 2027 is when the full hit comes back. I don't like the gap payroll positions because your payroll kind of looks like this. But I'm looking at 7.3%.
yeah.
So I had to really crunch there, I guess I would say. Going down the list, there's some vehicle costs there. That was a decision that was made in last year's budget, was to go ahead and get a lease for the office. Now, 9,800 is the lease cost. And then if you look down, there's various little costs. Now, that's being used by all staff in the office. So you'll see decreases in mileage in other budgets. But it was needed, and it was a decision we made last year to have a vehicle for the office and not be forcing staff to utilize their personal vehicles, right? The next bigger cost, I guess I would say, was office supplies at 10,100. We budget 8,500 last year. It's kind of tough not to increase that budget when the actuals for 2024 and 2023 were floating at about 10,100, consistent for 2 years there. If we go to the next page, IT services, computer software, computer hardware, kind of the bigger amounts at the top there. IT services, I mean, the costs are up, costs do go up from year to year with them. Software, we did slightly decrease the cost for that. Looking at some of the bigger costs, postage at $8,000. The actuals were about 7,400 last year, 7,600 the year before. So I did decrease the budget by 5, still having a bit above the actuals. Postage goes up every year, so I don't know what the postage value is this year, but it was a bigger hit. Carrie, was it not 8 cents or something like that, an envelope? When you've got tax bills that go out, tax statements and planning notices, it adds up pretty quick. Looking at audit, I left the budget the same. I know you'll look at the actuals at 10,000. Our 2024 is not closed yet, and audit is not complete. They're coming back in May, so that's why the actuals are not quite where they should be. I have dropped the legal fees for general matters down $5,000. You'll see we didn't spend a lot of money last year, and that's this line item's tough. You just never know when you're going to get into a legal issue. So I don't want to decrease it too much. Because I know when I decrease it, I'm going to get hit with a year that I don't have the money. So what do, right? HR matters, I've kept 8,000 there. We are dealing with a matter at this time that we know is going to cost something. So between the two of them, it's still 18,000. And last year we budgeted 18,500. So I've just shifted the money around really for that. Going down the list, consulting financial matters, I've dropped $5,000 this year. We do keep money there if we want to hire a grant writer for larger funding applications. I know council might say it's enough money, $5,000. A really drawn out funding application that takes a lot of time is about $5,000 is the cost. I will say the last term of council, we came forward and I believe we brought in about $4 million in funding, and we had used very little on this line. So it's something that it pays for itself in strides, right? So if we go down to insurance premiums, $94,000 over last year, about 89.
Something?
Yeah, question on that.
Yep.
94,000 just for this item. Then
Yep. Insurance is about 500,000 a year,
well,
about $500,000.
the tender.
Well, it's been quite some time. Now, here's the discussion on that. How many players are in the municipal environment?
There's only a couple. Yeah.
So it's not our broker that's dictating the cost, it's these insurers.
Only got-
You could change brokers all you want. I think their piece of the pie is pretty small. They're getting a commission. It's AIG, Cowan, BFL. And even with some of our policies, if you look at the breakdown, like when the garage burnt, there was 5 insurers.
It's 3 different insurance or 5, okay. But then, just say,
So,
done it in the past, just,
Yeah.
yeah, that's all, because that's a lot of money to pay, right? Even a small percentage, 2-3% makes it.
yeah, what we found over the last 2 years as well is this building's brand new and it's an addition, right? Because we still have our old building. So this building's brand new, 7,500 square feet. There's a cost to it. Medical center, 5,400 square feet, right? Cost to it. That's an additional building. The garage, brand new, 50% bigger than what it was before. Costs are up. Right? You know, all of our equipment in the garage burns. Now you insured for what the replacement value is today versus when we bought it. Costs are up. Very tough insurance. And you know, I can recall an article in the paper last year for North Bay. They budgeted, I believe it was 15% increase, came in at 17. You know, they were up just say 2%. It's tough because it's an expense that you don't really have a lot of say in.
Well, there's a broker fee. Some broker fees are hungrier than others, that's all.
Yeah, so what I find, and maybe this year may not be the year to go, maybe it's next year because our renewal is July 1. There's quite a bit of work involved with the tender on insurance because of, you know, your asset lists and the equipment and your properties, your content in your buildings and that. But I think it is time to go out, maybe not this year, but next year. I think all it does is it keeps, what you end up getting is you get one insurer works with a broker. They come forward in the first year, you get a big reduction. Just like your home insurance and your auto when you switch. And then as the years go up, it goes back up to what the current day price is.
See, my experience is that, especially if you have one broker and you go on and you ask for a quote, whichever broker you ask, their hands are tied for other brokers to go to that same company because now they're saying other priority. So they won't give them a price until this is done. So you may be right, maybe next year, but we should really take a look at it. Because I remember when I got on council, it was like $80,000 for everything.
Yeah.
Now we're at 500,000. That's a big chunk. If you save 2% of
When
500,000,
you first got in council, what year was it?
yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's a long time.
Yeah. I'll agree with you because when I started the township, it was about $150,000. And we're now 550.
Yeah.
Over 13 years, right?
So savings.
Yeah, what I would say though is last year, I say last year because we do our renewal July 1 to July 1. So when the renewal for 2024 BrokerLink did go up, they went to their usual like AIG and I believe they went to Cowan and Cowan. They did that because we were early. We had all our documentation in early and they were able to shop it. But some of them say, well, there's not really much we can do because of our claims history. So when you start looking at claims history, we've had some issues. We've had a garage that's burnt. Those start adding up and they stay on your record for so long. So they're provided, even that when we go to tender, we may be asked for our claims history. So we're putting everything on the table. And then they look at that and they say, oh, okay, right? So.
But once they give you your renewal, what their budget is for the year, then you got time. So once they give you that number, all you're trying to do is beat it. They can't go up on the price that they gave you.
The current person, once they give you a quote, no, it doesn't go.
Exactly.
Okay,
Sorry.
No, it's a good discussion. Yeah, excellent.
and then you'll see I budgeted 69,000. That's the 1% that I mentioned on the summary that I want to increase. So putting a percent into reserves for fire trucks. So that brings us to $1,017,000. I know comparing it to 2 million last year doesn't make sense because if you look at the line above 2 million, it's 1.1 million was the capital levy in the operating budget. Because what happens is once you pass the budget, and I know all those figures, I put them in the system. Right now, I could have went in and put in about $1.1 million or $1.2 million. That's from our summary. If you take $1 million out, you're not too far from what it was in prior year.
Monsieur Tracy, just a quick question on the variation in
Yeah.
the IT costs. I see 22 was a 1917,000.
So I've got some bills for 2024 that are not in the system right now.
That's what
Because I'm disputing some of the costs that are on them. So I know one of them is $2,000 for a trip that they came here to work for the day. While our agreement is they come one visit a month as part of our monthly cost. So I'm not paying $2,000. So that's one, right? That's not in there, but I mean, there's a couple little ones that are still. What happened is you get an invoice, you dispute a couple line items on it. There's still the bulk of the invoice that's got to be paid.
Okay, thanks.
So it will go up and that's why I know that. Also, and I don't want to discuss what we've done because we're not in camera, but we bulked up our cyber policy through insurance
Yes.
because of what we're seeing with universities and hospitals and that. So we've got a pretty robust cyber policy right now. To do that and have like a good premium, I had to increase some of the IT items that we do.
Okay,
Because what happens when you fill out a cyber policy, they say, do you have this? Yes. Do you have this? Yes. Or no. If you say no too many times, they're saying, oh, this is a high risk environment, the premium's 20,000 a year. But if we have a more robust IT side of things, then when we fill out an insurance policy, you can say, yes, we have all of this and your premium's respectable, I would say. So that's what we did in 2024. So it's being reflected this year.
so the insurance costs are insurance, but the upgrades for.
For IT or in IT.
Okay.
Correct, yeah. Now, if we flip the page, these are the first section, $19,000 versus last year's 22,000. I shaved 3,000 off of our own training costs. Just to try to assist as well. So now, obviously, there's some stuff that I'm done doing, like there was some MPA costs in last year because I took a course and then finished. But then also, if you look at the training costs for 2023 at 26,000, that was a training we had. One of the training was our solicitor came in, gave mandatory training to the staff on respect in the workplace and a few other topics where we invited counsel to come as well. That's why 2023 was higher. We had a big cost there. I mean, you bring a lawyer in for a day of training, there's a cost to it, right? We didn't have that for 2024. So the costs were about 18,000 for training in 2024. I'm increasing it by 1,000, but it's still 3,000 under last year's budget. The next section is the municipal office. So we're budgeting 73,275. Last year we budgeted about 71, but the actuals came in about 74,005. I've went through the accounts in detail to try to see what are some of the things that happen that will not annual things. So I'm not budgeting what the actuals were for 2024. I'm slightly under. You will see though insurance, I mean, on its own is over $2,000.
The actual was, for insurance was
19.
$2,000 in 2022 and it goes up to 19.
So what had happened was that there was partial years.
Okay.
We were in the old building.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't move into here until January of 2023, but we go July 1 to July 1. So that's what the difference was for there. Some of the costs you'll see, one of them is yard snow plowing and sanding. Now, most of our facilities are done by Public Works, so there is no yard plowing cost by department, like by facility, except this one here, we have a lease with the OPP. There's an understanding that when they get here in the morning, it's plowed, their doors are shoveled, all of that. So we kept the contract here because on a day where we get a lot of snow and all the Public Works staff are actually in plow trucks plowing the roads, the priority is not the front door here or the parking lot, right? They tend to get on those after the roads are done. So we kept the lease here and the one at the medical center because those are priority buildings, right? So that's why you see a cost here and you may not see them in other departments.
I'm impressed. I've been here a few times this year already and the staff are out in the morning shift there.
So what happens if we have an additional staff member at the arena, they will jump in the trucks and go to the building. And sometimes it's multiple times in a day. So they can have them ready at 8 a.m. just say, and they're good. And you know how snow is, like, a few hours later, the doors have to be done again. Because especially ones that are, highly used, like Canada Post front door, the front door at the arena, the library, the front door here, OPP is similar. We have at least the medical center is really important. We've got a lot of seniors that go there. There's a pharmacy. So it's, the staff here at the back door, we don't mind. Like it can go the day and it's not a big deal. But those places there, it only takes one slip and fall or, as soon as somebody walks through a bunch of snow and has to get into a place, then there's comments like, oh, it wasn't shoveled when I got there. So it seems like there's a lot of priority locations, not a lot of staff to kind of.
But it's working.
It's working. It's working. So that's that. Now, if we get into the next section, that's a former, it's the school, it's the OPP lease. So I budgeted about 161,000 in revenue. Last year was about 145. We're still reconciling 2024s. Last year we budgeted 184, but what happens with that lease, we've got to watch. Increases are absorbed by the lease, by the OPP, basically, to a certain amount. So it's dictated in the lease that it's, CPI, and if it's not CPI, it's 3%, and if it's not that, it's actuals. So it's really hard from year to year to nail down the exact figure. We do watch what's being done in building maintenance, just saying, because if you have too much cost overruns and you allow too much, there's only so much that absorbs in the operating section. If not, then you start eating away at the base rent, which is kind of our gravy, or it's our minimum rent value, right? So anyway, I've looked at those costs. You will see, there will be a discussion today, and it's not in the capital budget yet, but there's been a request by the OPP for $25,000 expense to put air conditioning in the gym section where they train, because in the summer and they're training in there, they found that it's really hot. That was a discussion we had almost, it's not included in there, but we should have the discussion today. But we've not invested over the years too much in that building. So some years you'll see building maintenance here goes high because there's something that needs to be done, but then that ends up coming from our base rent. So how it works is anything that's capital in nature and not operating, it's really the landlord's expense. So that's why some years we don't net as high as others. Yep.
Council,
Champagne?
what's the net lease on there? How many more years are left there?
Quite a few, because every time they renew 5, they add a 5-year option. So it's always about 20 years.
Oh, which is good. Okay.
Yeah. They're quite happy. Craig that works there is really, really good to work with. Greg mostly deals with him. They've also, just to let council know, they've actually gone to the OPP on their own as well, through us, agreeing to it. They've invested money in the building on things that I would say it's probably a gray area whether landlord should pay or whether they should pay, but they wanted to see some upgrades and they went to the OPP and got approvals. So they've been putting money into the building. That's not come from us and that's not affected our lease. It's through the ministry they get the money. So this year that was an ask that they had that I didn't include in the capital, but I'd like to discuss that this year. So.
Just to follow up on that question, so basically last year the actual was 62,000 and this year we're,
The net amount,
yes?
we haven't finished reconciling, but about that, yes.
Okay, and so this year we're at 65,
Yeah,
but there's been no specific requests from an operating perspective. It's not the capital.
yeah.
So if we look at the actuals for the former 3 years, we might be a bit, there could be a bit of room there for.
There could be,
adjustment,
there
yes?
could be.
Okay. We just want to be careful because they're a great tenant.
Yes.
Obviously, but there is $15,000 there or
Yeah.
10.
The last time we invested there was years ago, before I was the CAO. Windows and doors were looked at, done. And then they wanted an upgrade to the floor of the stage, which is their gym.
Yeah.
Okay, so they actually came forward, so we did that. We got painting done in there through the lease though, back in 2023 or 2024, we did painting. So there's not been a lot on our end that we've put into that building. It is an old building, right? So, there will be bigger costs someday, but at this time, we've been lucky that there isn't anything too significant.
Good morning, Councillor Kelly. Good morning. We're just proceeding with the review of some of our operating costs.
Which is fine. But I always err on the side and it's worked out quite well for me. Maybe we should be looking at taking little bites and to throw some money into it to make sure that it's up to par instead of doing one big Band-Aid or one big project that we're going to eat all in 1 year, right? So maybe we should start looking at, put a list down and,
whether it's windows, doors, flooring, whatever the case may be, and we can maybe tackle a little bit here and there, so it's not one big dump truck load of.
Yeah, it'd be nice in the capital budget every year to have something being done over there.
I'm not putting anything in here that everybody says, no.
we all know this, but I'm just saying, you know what, if you're saying it, I don't know what the condition is.
It's
It's been a while since I've been in there. maybe we should be starting to.
We'll have that discussion when we get to capital budget, whether or not we
Yeah.
take bite-sized pieces or a larger piece of cheese.
Yeah,
Makes sense, yeah.
All right,
okay.
Yeah.
So on the next page. Councilor Elise, okay.
okay, you okay?
You know where you're at? Yeah, okay. Good, thank you. Good. So on the next page, if we look at expenditures, it says legal fees St. Teresa, it's $95,000. So if you look, we budgeted $105,000 last year for the cleanup cost related to St. Teresa and Cenotaph Park. The actuals at this point are $81,000, but we don't have a bill for December. I'm likely looking at about 10,000 or somewhere between 10 and 15, I would say. So I was able to reduce the budget by $10,000 for 2025. If you look at prior years, there was much more higher values, but Antoine's been working with, so we still have Knight Diesel that represents us. So they do some work that, if you can recall what the deal with the school board was, anything related to the skimmer is 100% our cost. Then every other cost after is a split of 80-20, where we cover 20% of the cost. So Antoine's been working with the engineers and MOE and Knight Diesel to try to reduce things like sampling every year. Try to reduce the activity so that the costs are reduced. That's an ongoing effort. I'm hoping there's a day where they say, we're done. And what it is left is what's there, right? I think we're trending in the right area with a reduction in the last year or two. So we'll see how it pans out for this year. But discussions are every spring roughly, Antoine, I believe, according to.
Because essentially in line with this March 31st of every year, there's that goes towards what they call WOW, which is basically the order from.
The next section, 53,000, just say, so 52,967 in revenue, 95,000 in cost is the medical center. So I think we've got to have a discussion about this here. So number one, if you look at the expenses, property tax of 14,000. We've now, that building starting in 2024 was the assessment was done by MHAC to determine what the value is. So if you see there was a tax of 13,800, it's not a true expense to us because we're getting revenue. So that's why I say when you look at 95,000, it's about 80. Revenues, what I've done is I've prepared agreements that I'm going to present to the doctors this month. Also about a bit of a negotiation. So in last year's $34,000, that represents pharmacy, Boston Family Health Team. The pharmacy still got about 7 years of a lease. There was a 10-year lease with 10 years of revenues dictated in there, 3% increase, I believe, per year. So the pharmacy was set. Boston Family Health Team, a little tougher. They've got X amount of money that comes from the ministry to be able to put towards this. I still feel there should still be increases every year. I mean, there is increases from the ministry, although small increases is what they receive in their funding, right? It's a discussion that has to be had between the doctors, Powassan and myself about what services, because Powassan's serving two different clinics, right? Anyway, what I've done is I've estimated what we can bring in this year in revenue. I did not budget anything for telephone and internet. What I'm trying to do is go forward to them. There's going to be some subsidy from the municipality. If it's 1% of our budget, in the end, it's not a lot considering what it offers to the community. With the services are there, plus another fourth doctor eventually coming. If the taxpayer is paying 50,000 a year, just say, or 60,000, I mean, it's a pretty good service like anything else that we have. The discussion with the doctors has to be, what are they willing to absorb now? We have a couple years of actual data now. So 2022 is the first year. We didn't have a full year of the picture, I guess I would say. 2023 and 2024, we know what it is now. Now the discussion has to be what they're going to absorb versus what we're paying. Similar to what Powassan's agreement is, the town of Powassan with their clinic, and they have agreements in place. They subsidize things as well. So this year's the year, and this month is the month to introduce that to them about negotiating where we're going with it. Yeah.
Wait, Councillor Fontaine, go ahead.
Just a comment, just because we were at the last conference and the minister did mention that we're ahead of the game.
Yes.
We've been proactive in what we did. And I got a feeling that if any funding is coming down the line, we would qualify for something like that. You know, for any expenditures that we wanted to do to the clinic. And they were very happy to suggest that other municipalities should do the same. So hat off to council and everything at the time that it was done. So
yeah, what I found tough at the first with this lease is we started off a lease or a building with one doctor and nothing else. How do you start saying to one doctor, you're absorbing all costs for the facility, right? Like, I mean, good luck. The person would have stayed in their home office. I would have. But now that we know better what's there, we've got the pharmacy, we've got Powassan there, and what services are there, and you've got the doctors, you can start spreading out some of the costs amongst 3, 4 people versus 1, 2. So that's why I say with 2 years of data, being able to go in now and say, this is what the costs are, we need to have a real discussion here. The biggest cost is cleaning. Now, you don't think that's dictated by infection control? You got to remember at first, for the first while, the front unit 3, we call it, was vacant. It wasn't being cleaned. There was no need to clean it. It's now been fully absorbed. Well, now when we look at cleaning going up, well, now there's more to be cleaned, right? Unit 3 itself has a hallway, has 4 offices, has a kitchenette, has a washroom added to this. Those costs, they're not cleaning the pharmacy. Pharmacy takes care of their own cleaning costs. That was part of the lease. We tried to negotiate at the start that there'd be the same cleaner for all the facility. They didn't want to pay our cleaner. So they clean their own facility. They pay all their security costs. Everything at the pharmacy is covered by them, except for utilities. Is where we're at with that. So we need to now have a discussion this year and get to a point where we say, okay, let's have a lease now for, I don't know, 5 years with a doctor. How Powassan structured theirs is they have individual leases with each doctor.
Oh.
You got to remember that the 3 doctors are individually professional corporations. It's not one corporation. So if you start entering the leases, you've got separate leases, right? Powassan's a separate lease, the pharmacy is a separate lease. So, yeah.
Do we pay janitorial services for the other departments?
Yep. Like I'll give you an example. We have a janitor here where that comes in. One fire hall. It's being done by volunteers, firefighters and staff, basically. Not the best, right? The garage, the Coral Park Hall has some as well. The garage is minimal office space, basically. It's something that's been discussed quite a bit in 2024 amongst myself and Greg. He oversees the cleaners about whether it's time to have our own cleaner versus
This is what I'm getting
Yeah.
at. Maybe we should start taking a look at that because it might be cost saving. I mean, something 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Something 3 days a week.
The OPP as well has a cleaner. It's covered by the lease, right? There, it's a little tougher. You've got to have a security check done and you've got to be bonded and you've got to have, like, we don't have access there unless we go in with Craig. The cleaners have their own access. They're the only ones that go in when nobody's there, basically, right? The problem, when you add up all those buildings, can someone do all that work with 1 week, 35 hours? Well, sorry, they'd be unionized, it'd be 40 hours a week. Now you start looking at it and saying, you know, you throw in the medical center, it's not possible. Because the hours being spent for there is the bulk of it, of someone's week almost, right? So it starts making it tough.
Something to look at.
But certainly, I mean, a medical office is a real success story.
Yes.
Our citizens are delighted with the medical office, with the service it's offering. And so we knew going in that we would have unknowns and we would work through them.
Yep.
And so I think overall, we're on and certainly in the right direction. And so for us, it's to ensure equity as well.
Yes.
With as you mentioned, with the Powassan Area Family Health Team, we want to be, in a similar position as the medical clinic in Powassan, in a sense, right?
Mhm.
That's important to us, that equity as part of that family group. So you're going to be examining that, which is wonderful. You're going to be examining leases, which is wonderful. And so I would say that we're on the right track for this year. And you're engaging in that process now, so. Maybe Councilor Kelly.
Yeah, just a comment, as well as the pharmacy. If people can't say enough great things about the pharmacist and his staff.
Yeah.
And it's just a bonus. It's what an add-on, you know.
I just add on. I think we talked a little bit about this same conversation last year.
It's coming up again. We said we would look at the numbers this year. I agree with Councillor Champagne and everything else, and that's what you're saying, 100%. The cost for the cleaning is starting to get to a point where we're gonna have to have a little deeper dive look at this, right? So, yeah, totally agree. Like, it's looking this year to save, and like I said, next year it's gonna be even tougher. And this is, well, it's time then.
Yeah.
100% on pot committed.
Now, to add to it, the cleaner is different at the medical center than all other facilities.
Yeah.
Two companies.
Yeah.
One does just medical center.
Yeah. And I don't know how you do about that, whether if you had a full-time staff of cleaner, what do you do at nighttime, right? Like,
That's what they do at the Burke, is that.
I know, so it's, you know what I mean? So that's
So there are some things that can be done during the day. I'll give you an example. This room.
Yeah.
It's utilized more for meetings, but there's times where once a week it can be done. It can be done during, and we've had lots of conversations, Greg and I, about this, that when does the person start? When do they work? Medical center, you can't be doing it during the day. It's an after hours thing. So she goes in, Natasha, when the facility's closed. She only does Monday to Friday because, and that Friday at noon it's closed. So now you can get in earlier. She can also go in on a Saturday or Sunday if she didn't go in on Friday. Right? But everything else is after hours over there. Where municipal facilities, some of them you could be during the day.
Yeah.
So when would, if you had a staff member, when do they start? Well, maybe it means it's a different shift. Not every day, but one day might be it's an 8 to 3 and the next time they're doing a 4 to 12, right? Like. With your own staff, you can, you know, if you're having issues with a company, a contractor, a little harder to deal with them when it's your own staff member. You can also dictate different things or, you know, anyway, I think there's more flexibility when it comes to that. I think it's a separate item to come to council and report to council to say, here's a bit of a business case.
Sure.
What we think. Sure. You know, maybe it's a phase in of somebody.
Yeah.
And tackle as much as we can. And then, you know, maybe one day, you know, we wrap the medical center into that, but it's working over there. I just find half the costs are cleaning. Now, somebody might say, well, yeah, that makes sense, Jason. It's a medical facility. Right?
Yeah.
I don't think you want residents going to a place and they say, oh, this place hasn't been cleaned in a while, when it's a medical clinic, right?
But on the other hand too, to look at it, not to throw a wedge in it, but I've been in Emerge for quite a few years and there's cleaning staff during working hours.
Yep.
Where things are not going well or somebody's having a bad day and cleaning staff just kind of steps aside and says, okay, well, we're gonna be out of here for a little while, we'll go somewhere else. So, you know what I mean? There's a bit of a blend there and I understand that, I just find that sweet spot, right? So, but it can be done.
Okay. And for the comments, move on. Yeah, so good discussions.
The next line is impact, $83,000 over last year, 80,775. We have no control over that.
Sorry, I lost you.
And that's general government council, ABCs we did when we did the summary. Now we're getting it into policing. I know we're behind on time, sorry. I'll try to catch up quick here. Okay, so policing, if we look at the first section, that's revenues, right grant, court security, and prisoner transportation. So we budget 8,400, about the same budget as last year, and the actuals were about 8,200. Now the difference is really the right grant. From year to year, we work on a calendar month. They work on an April 1 to March 31st. So sometimes, you know, we budget, you'll see revenue of 6,300, cost of 5,100. It's more of a timing thing. If you look at the expenses for policing, 6,600 for the ride program, policing 587,000 and 911 call taking is 2,775. Now, policing should be higher than that. It should be about $19,594 over last year. What I've done is every quarter we get a credit back from the police to based on detachment revenues that were collected and we get the money for that. So when I went over the years, it averages about $11,000. So because we're so tight this year, I've reduced the 19,000 expense by $11,000. That's the money. Remember I mentioned last year that we had that bit of credit and I get it every year, that if we want to increase enforcement, speed enforcement in an area, there's money in the policing budget to do it. This year, there's no money in the budget to do that. I've used up the 11,000 to reduce our tax levy increase this year.
It's not a bad thing.
I'm pulling, like I said, I spent a lot of time after with managers and on my own, just looking for $1,000 here, $1,000 there, because it all adds up.
That's right. Perfect.
So that's the budget. The next section is police service board. We have cost recoveries of $677. That's based on, so we're now 3 municipalities forming one detachment board, Boston, Chisholm and ourselves. So if you look of that total budget, $9,535 is our cost, but we will receive back $677 for where the secretary treasurer, I believe is the name of the board, is Carrie. And part of the budget is Carrie's time, $1,500. So we're gonna get back $677 of it from other municipalities. So the net amount for service boards is about $88 to $58. The next line is provincial, our share of the POA fines from the city of North Bay, about $3,000. We did not receive our 2024 actuals yet. They don't come till around May or June, so for year end, I'm gonna have to book an estimate. Flip the page. We've got animal control services, so we've got about 2,500 budgeted for dog tag sales. Last year was about 2,700, but the year before was 2,470. So I kind of put it in the middle, about $100 more than we budgeted for 2024. And our expenses are up, just say about $600. So we have dog tags and licensing forms for 325 and contract services with the Humane Society for 16,005.
One question, do we have a report on how many call-outs they've done in the past year?
No, we can request the info. As part of the agreement with them is they're supposed to provide stats every 6 months. I'll be honest, we received stats quite some time ago. It's not consistent. And stats we received in the past, some of the addresses were not East Ferris, they were just say Bonfield. So I'm not sure. And I don't want to say this, but you know, the term garbage in, garbage out. If somebody that's attending a call here goes back in their system and puts an address of Bonfield or Bonfield as the community, well, that stat's going to Bonfield, not to us. So I'm not sure how accurate, I guess, the info would be, but I can request it.
The one thing for sure is we're not getting, there's no negativity currently in
Complaints.
municipality related to animal control.
Yeah.
Where there was
Yes,
significantly much more in the past, right? So now we don't hear it. So I'm assuming it's because it's being controlled, but it's a good question to have to request the
Yes.
statistics, obviously. Councillor Kelly.
I agree, because I remember back when I first started, I mean, it was endemic, number in constant calls.
I haven't had a complaint in over 2 years,
I'm probably more than that, Steve.
so something's working.
Yeah, some things work.
Yes, it's not broken.
Sorry about that.
okay, so if we flip the page, we're on to Public Works.
We get 2 minutes?
Yes,
Oh, wait, thank you so much for.
we
making
are
that.
running, Greg, 45 minutes behind. I tried to do some catching up, but yeah.
It's very interesting. It's very good. Yeah, it's like
Kim move, did Kim move? Her little thing here. Her name's right here, Kim.
Yeah.
Gonna be over
Do you want your badge?
Is that really Kim or is that AI?
Oh, my God.
You seen some of the commercials?
I know.
AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is, it's a scary world.
Yeah, and the butterfly,
Is there one that's got?
I don't know.
Yes.
That's another one. Anyway,
Anyway,
a new world.
So now we're gonna get into transportation services, and environmental services. Just to recap, the budget, when you look at both of them combined, it's an increase of $38,648 this year. So very small increase, less than 1% on our tax levy. We're gonna start with the operating budget first, and then Antoine's gonna get into capital budget. He has circulated a separate capital budget presentation as usual, so you have it in front of you. So you should be, at the top of your page, it should say category 300 to 454. So that's where we're starting. You can start when you're ready, Antoine, just highlight the bigger items. We're about an hour behind time. Thank you.
Walk very quickly. So, I mean, everybody here on council, like you've been used to seeing the general format. So the way we've laid it out is the first section 311 is bridges and culverts. So we've got an item which is basically the aggregate that we purchase. We stockpile them every year. So we've evaluated about 22,000. We got some asphalt. That's when we do culverts on roads that are paved, and then we need to repave those sections. And then generally speaking, like this year, we're trying to be aggressive as well on culverts because we've identified a lot of them to be redone. So we have a 25,000. The rest is just small items. We have pest control, which is capturing like all the beaver mostly that we have to do because there's a lot of work on that. And if we, permits are just like conservation authority and so forth.
Line item is down the week.
321 is usually I'm trying to read there, which one? I might shift to mine. Brushing, which is contracted out actually. And then we go down to the next item, which is ditching. Ditching every year. Now we do in-house a bit of blasting. So we basically stock our equipment. And then we've been actually proactive in hitting some of the ditches area that don't drain so well. So every year we're trying to tackle some. So we wanted to keep a little bit of that. Asphalt is generally speaking like the potholes. It's funny, I was in with Good Roads and then they had the discussion presenting, I think the city in Toronto had $5 million for potholes. So we have 17,000. The rest is shoulder maintenance. That's when we have washouts on roads, a bit of granular as well. And then also loose stop patch under 341, a bit of gravel for washouts and certain road repairs that we have. The next item it's a bigger item. It's basically the calcium. Every year we have to cover our roads. That's the projected cost of where we're going to be. And under 345, we separate that item, but it's for small repairs on gravel sections of roads. As we move on to the crack sealing, we have a 35,000 that we had budgeted, but we couldn't really tap into it because we had some surprises last year in the cost of certain materials. So we decided to forego the crack sealing, but this year we're trying to bring it back. Revenues is basically the cost sharing because we have a boundary road with Calendar, so we invoice them a portion of the salt purchase. And then if we move on to the next item, I'm just gonna flip the page.
For control.
It's under winter control. So sand. Sand and salt, we have recognized now that the price has went up drastically. So it's not necessarily that we're trying to triple the quantities, is that we're reflecting the most recent costs.
We budgeted 5,000 tons is what that represents. What's the cost for sand in 2023 versus 2024? What today's price is on ton?
Yeah, so I know that the last price was around 13.50 or so, so we're budgeting in a $14 a ton kind of thing. But before that, it was like, it almost doubled essentially. Salt, that's always a small increase, pretty consistent from year to year, but it's really reflecting the quantity that we're projecting to complete the year. The next item that we have is falling under road safety. So road safety, we have signs. Just as a little note, there's not really digital signs this year. Last year, we did replace some digital signs, but this is mainly to replace some of the, now that we've done an audit, it's to correct some of the signs and then to add some signs we're missing. The post goes with basically the signs. Guide rails, it's to repairs, basically the post that we have, the wood post that we repair every year. A little note, however, on the pavement marking, you'll notice some sort of an increase in this case, but we have to consider as well that we've paved some section on the Trout Lake with active transportation. So basically, we're gonna have to continue painting those lines, otherwise they're gonna disappear. So there's a bit more line painting in that sense. Railroad is basically our railroad crossing charges that we are charged on a yearly basis. Under the next item is basically the fleet. The fleet that you have is the summarized of each, like for instance, diesel, it's not breaking down for per equipment, but it's giving you the global for all of our fleet.
For 2024, we're still expensing off, like as part of year end, we look at how much inventory we have in our tanks versus what has to be written off. And we have card lock systems. We get reporting out of it that tells us what equipment used what fuel. So we still have to do our year end entry for 2024. That's not seeing the actuals. But if you look at even 2023 versus what's being budgeted in 2024 and 5, I mean, it's relatively small.
And that software that we're using has been really helping us a lot because now we really truly understand what equipment uses what. So it's better to put that. So diesel and gas, and then we have a little bit of propane. Tire, again, it's the general, it's a certain piece of equipment require replacement of tires. For instance, the older tandem truck that we have needs to be replaced. Mechanical services, typically what we would do to maintain our fleet throughout the year. A few purchases for small tools, and then we have equipment maintenance. Those are mostly the parts, but it's also basically the wear parts for the winter operation as well. So just to consider, we have like blades and stuff like that that are replaced under that 54. Insurance, basically and then licenses to keep our licensed vehicle on the road, basically. MTO charge. Under the next section, we have some revenues. So we're projecting entrance permits for this year. Again, we should have a relatively high demand. Half load permits, that's something we've introduced a few years ago. It's working well. So we're projecting that to continue. Engineering services, that's kind of for me, slight increase. We're starting to hear some projects coming back like after the COVID period where everything kind of stopped. So slowly it's kind of climbing back a little bit. Aggregate levy, that's for the cost revenue we have from resources sold within the municipalities, our share. If we go on to expenditure, well, we have the first, if I can kind of get the first 12 or so lines, that's basically staff operation, basically our staff for salaries. And then we go on. I'm not too sure if you want me to walk through these. You know, you've got some uniforms that we maintain. We've
bigger items, Antoine.
Yeah. Some of the.
I would say things like surveying costs, insurance, is pretty straightforward.
Surveying costs, for instance, that's when we do an evaluation of it's the item 3360. So we do an evaluation of all our roads. As Jason had mentioned, some of the invoices are still coming in. So we actually expensed that amount. Last year it wasn't zero. So we expensed it. And then we were able to do some of the capital roads that we're projecting in the future as well. Like for instance, we'll talk about, you know, well, we may not go into it, but the asset management has identified some of the roads, like for instance, South Shore Road. So we've surveyed the road. So we have those. And also this next year, it would be really, really good to evaluate some of the curvature of the roads where we need like advanced signage and then positioning of it. So that's where surveying falls under. Insurance rates and licenses, that's to operate some of our two-way radio tower systems and so forth.
Question on insurance on Juan or Jason. Last year, the actual was 77,000. This year, for the insurance, we're going down $5,000. What's that reasoning for that?
The actual is 69.
Yep. So
Budget.
I looked at what the estimate was. If you look at prior years, 67 versus 69, and we went up 77. So so for insurance, you gotta look at it, sometimes properties have a different increase than equipment, has a different increase than your contents, than liability. So one could be going up 15%, one went up 5%. So that's why I adjusted that one this year.
Okay, so expected back down to 72,000, which is just okay, I get it now.
And it's tough from year to year because how is insurance reading it? So it was last year's renewal, the one before, all the fire trucks doubled. Now, they're not 5,000 each. They were 2,000 some, 2,300. They went up to 40,000 some. That year was like, okay, there was an issue and they doubled the cost of a fire truck, but it wasn't double on a heavy equipment. So it's very tough. Like we're trying to strategically look at them and say, what did happen last year? So, yeah. That's part of the trying to pinch where we can without just saying, oh, it's a 2%, 3, 5, let it ride, right? Like. Good. I will say for council info, like I did the math, like the increase I told you at the start of this, Antoine's up 38,000, 36,000 is winter control. Like your biggest increase, if you looked at it from a global, his whole department, winter control is an increase of 36,000. Like the rest, there's ins and outs. Right, so
if we were to move on page 5, then you would item 82 is the garage. So garage, you're starting to understand a little bit better the overall cost for the propane. And then you'll see further down below the hydro cost. So now that we've had the building for over a year, we're starting to understand our cost of operation for that building. We're projecting the figures that you see above. And a bit of equipment for the garage as well. There's the item for maintenance, parts and supply. This is mostly all the hydraulics. So we've been starting to kind of control. We have a hydraulic room where we should, replace hoses. That's projection for the year. And then we have some building maintenance costs. That's kind of showing some costs we want to do to be more efficient on the sea containers as well. Some of the buildings outside where we store our signs, but they're really not accessible. So we're going to try to put some.
If I could mention something there, Antoine and I had a meeting last Friday on Zoom about budget, and then after it, I added $5,000 to that line item without Antoine knowing, to be honest with you. I'd like to beef up a bit of security over at the garage. We've had an issue, OPP is aware of an issue. What I'm thinking is additional cameras or maybe lighting, something around the sand dome. So it's not something I've discussed with Anton, but I think this year we've got to do something about it. We've had, I believe it's 2 instances there since we've built the garage. Same individual, we're aware of who it is, but we run into that thing where we tell the OPP this is what's going on and they've got to catch somebody in the act. So I think we've got to look at security at our garage to do something. 5,000 doesn't get you very far in the security equipment world. I think it's maybe additional lighting. So there is something to do something, basically.
So Monsieur Trottier, you added it to.
Building maintenance to bring it to 8,500. Antoine had it at 3,500, which more matched the 2023 actuals.
Okay.
He was looking at some changes to the sea containers. I threw that in there because I know it's come up. It's been a discussion with Antoine and I. We've not been able to get Centauri Security in to say, what else can we do here? Something's got to be done.
I think we had a general discussion on generator. That's kind of the cleaning up the area where staff is working mostly. And then if I jump the hydro cost again and then interest premium again, if you look at the actual, that's the reflection towards the number that's shown.
Yeah. If I may address insurance, you'll see in 2023 was about 5,500 and then we had 10,000. it was a partial year, not a full year because of when we took occupancy at the garage. So what happens when the garage is being built, it's being insured by the contractor. Fire or anything that happens. Once it's turned over to us, it hits our insurance policy. So we didn't have a full year. Then you'll see that it went to $10,000. What had happened though is we had already budgeted past the 2024 final budget and our renewal came after. So we under budgeted. So that's why this year we're at 11,800, which is about 1,800 over last year. So if that's what I mean with insurance, it's some areas a bit of a guess.
So the next section that we have then goes towards conference and training. So in this case, we're looking at mostly training. So there's some either like the propane licenses on a 3-year cycle we renew. Or what we try to do is do like a winter operation. I know staff drive cars all the time, but we need to be able to show that they're up to date on their training. So
We more matched what the expenses were for 2024. We had previously looked at our foreman attending OGRE, but he's not available. He doesn't go every year, but he has in the past. And it was something we want to offer up, but for this year, he wasn't available. So we're comfortable with 2,500 being the budget. It's half of what we budgeted last year.
That's a quick question with group training. For the boys, chainsaw certified.
we did all that training. I know Kim's got all the documents, so every so often we just check again and see where we're at, and then we do a renewal.
Yeah.
What Kim did in 2024, Kim, and you might have started at the end of 2023, was looked at every personnel file, pulled all training certificates and anything they had when they started with us and documented it. Then what we want to do from there is say, okay, propane handling should be every 3rd year, chainsaw should be every 3rd or 4th or 5th, whatever it be, to come up with a schedule to make sure that we're on top of our training schedules, basically, right?
Yeah,
Then
program for that, eh? Like just.
yeah.
And where I'm going with it is, and I'm way ahead, okay, but I'm thinking ahead.
So you got emergency management. So if something happens in our community, tree starts falling, we have guys that are currently licensed. We have guys that are current licensed.
We're able to have,
Oh, I'm just saying maybe that line, somewhere the training could help out is from a different department, because that department's gonna flow into a different area where money from training can offset.
So Madam.
Oh, we could talk into that later on where I'm thinking, but it would alleviate some of the public works training budget too,
We've had,
or increase
we've
it.
got rec staff that's also been trained in the past.
Yeah.
Dominic is.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, so we have 2 currently fully licensed for chainsaw operator training in public works department, and Greg will probably speak to a little bit of training in Parks and Rec. I know they're looking at that this year as well.
Good discussion. Thank you. Wait, okay, continue.
okay, so that's kind of basically the training part. And then the next item is related to the streetlights. We have approximately 100 streetlights. And then you can see that we have some repairs. What we've been doing is basically repairing the existing high pressure sodium. We're sometimes changing also slightly towards the LED. So when they're beyond, they're past their life, then we change them to LED. One thing you'll notice as well is that the budget cost of the hydro has dropped because we did an internal review, and then hydro approved the fact that we reduced a certain percentage, and we said now we shouldn't be paying the flat fee, we should have a reduced flat fee, and they recognize the LED lights that we have. So every 2-3 years, we'll do that very same exercise, and we'll say, okay, we have 20% more LED, and then can we reduce our operation cost? The next items are basically the revenues, charges that we would collect for garbage. And then the next one is basically the contracted cost that we have. This one would be
148,000 is what's on tax bills for garbage fees.
Yeah.
That's gotta change maybe.
And it also reflects, it reflects also some of our costs, because that's not the only cost that the collection and service, because we also have the pushing and then the covering, and so there's other costs. So it's basically a cost that's a bit higher than what.
Just pause here, Councillor Champagne. So you're indicating that this could be an area for increased fees?
Sorry?
So Councillor Champagne was indicating that the garbage collection is an area that could see increased fees. So just wondering, with the changes in garbage collection that are anticipated in the fall, do we see any modifications there in fee collection?
Well, so this is the garbage part, and then what we're talking about, I think it's the recycling, which is the next part that we have further down.
A discussion that I had, Downtown and I discussed is that this year Blue Box transitions in September. So in a way, for 2027, or sorry, 2026, we won't have the recycling fee just on a tax bill. But then we've discussed on the flip side, modernizing our landfill. That's been a discussion at the Public Works Committee. It's also a strapline item. So we've talked about having to go out for garbage collection tender this year. Because right now, we don't want to go out for garbage collection tender because it's tied in with recycling. It's the same contract, same agreement. Now that we're transitioning to box, we can go out for tender for garbage on its own. So this year would be to go out for tender for that. When it comes to the fee that's on tax bills for next year, then we might say, well, when we look at the cost of garbage collection plus landfill, it makes sense to charge X amount on a tax bill. So that fee may change. But also there's been a good discussion to have that, okay, we're not gonna have the collection costs of recycling.
Yes.
So there's a drop in our budget, but can we also take money to say, let's do what we need to do at the landfill?
Yes.
So that's a next year. We didn't want to play around too much this year. You're gonna see that the revenues down the line, it's the recycling, where's recycling? Way on to the next page. You'll see recycling, we budgeted to have $100,000 cost for recycling collection this year. Last year, we budgeted 130. The actuals were 109. So we've reduced it because we're gonna have less collection costs this year. But it's a discussion to be had next year. What are we doing with the revenues and expenses here?
May I
It's the
ask,
time to adjust.
may I ask why it could not be a discussion for this year? Why would
It can be towards the end of the year, but the thing is tax bills go out in May
Yes,
and the fees are
I
set.
say, yeah.
So there could be a discussion this year, but the actual recycling fee on a tax bill would change for next year is what I mean.
Okay,
But we can talk this year, when we go out to tender, we're gonna know what our garbage collection costs are. We can start discussing there and
there would be nothing that would prevent us though from, if we make a change in our fees, to go back to council and bring a modification in our fee.
we can change our fees and charges by law when council wants to.
Yeah.
The only thing is when it's something that's on a tax bill,
It's more difficult because, yeah,
we would be sending out an additional tax bill if there's an increase. So that's why I'm saying it's next year for that.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that we can't start looking at the landfill modernization this year.
okay.
It just means that the revenue piece, yeah.
And we took the new tender probably coming out September at the same time as the recycling coming.
Yeah, and only because it's on my mind right now and I thought about it, we are now have Moneris, or I should say that it's a payment system, electronic payment system at the landfill now, where you can pay by debit card.
Yes, that's good.
So that started last week. That was,
The implementation started last.
so that was a discussion at Public Works. That was supposed to be a goal for this year. We actually said we get it going around January. The machine's in, it's being used. So we accept cash like we normally do, but we accept debit as well now. So,
Thank you.
sorry, I'm trying.
No, it's progress. So I think that clarifies the
Garbage collection, wait.
components. And then if we go on to the 451 is landfill site. The first item that you see is the typical tipping fees. That's what people pay at the gate when they come in. So that's.
It was riding quite a bit last year,
Yeah.
142,000 versus the budget of 125. The 125 was more reflective of 2022 actuals, and we said 2023 was a busy year. Well, if you look, 2024 was still a busy year, not as busy as 2023. So we've budgeted the actuals of 2024 for 2025. Hoping that it comes in at the same level, 142,000.
What would have made 2023 that busy?
I'll give you an example. When there's demolition of properties like houses or cottages or anything like that, that drives up some of that there as well.
If there's any fuel cleanup, those we don't expect them, but then there's a higher charge. So when sometimes we see a spike in revenue.
And brushing and stumps and.
But we could have taken an average of the last 2 years in terms of revenue potential. Instead of just taking the actual of, I know, it's just a discussion over, and where there's opportunities to adjust.
And it's tough, because on the expense side, like Antoine does well at this in his year. Like he said earlier, I was a high on some other stuff. I didn't do crack ceiling for 35. You can cancel expense. You can't create a revenue.
No, okay.
It either comes or it's not there. We can't do nothing about revenue line. That's why I like to be a little more conservative on that side. But this year I was,
Crystal ball.
like I'll present Tech Breeds later on budget because he's not back till tomorrow. But I threw in more revenue there than what he presented to me. I can gamble a little more there on a smaller revenue line than something like a tipping fee. If we put in 20,000 or 10,000 or 20 more, it could be that we don't get that. And then we're trying to shave somewhere, Yeah, they're tough.
Thank you.
Quick, so that's commercial and residential combined, of course.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I guess
So I guess moving forward, we're gonna be able to differentiate between residential.
we always do.
Because we have the full breakdown of every payment and it's all identified, so we totally have those numbers.
We have them, but we're not documenting, Councillor Tran, right now what the split is. Like I couldn't tell you what the split is. We get payment sheets though, so we know who it's coming from, whether it's a resident or Canor or Miller. But we're not inputting it anywhere in the system in terms of the split. What we would have to do is pick the vendors that are commercial in our accounting software, pick that account, derive the number, but it's not something quick right now. Yeah.
It'll also be interesting to see, because we have debit there now, because people have told me they've gone to North Bay because they forget to get money and they've got their truckload, so
Yeah.
they go somewhere else, so.
I'm surprised though, because you're not supposed to go to another community.
But it's people, it's not you. You said people you know.
See, so at our landfill, like they're supposed to present an ID that shows an address in Corbeil or Hesterville. So.
So the next section that we have is basically to run the operation of the landfill site. One item that you'll see, and then we kind of talked about it, the 3240, there's a telephone and internet. That's actually this payment machine that we've allocated some costs to be able to operate it. And then we have the consulting, that's mostly the monitoring wells that we would do on a yearly basis to report back to the ministry. We have the landfill post-closure cost that we have to.
They're double this year. You're gonna hear from the auditors when they present 2023 that there's something called asset retirement obligations now. It's a new PSAB, Public Sector Accounting Standard Board regulation. So the landfill is being treated differently again. So this is the second time it's changed in my time here. So now what they're looking at, and that's why we're delayed with 2023 as well, is as part of asset retirement obligations, we got to look at facilities that have asbestos or vermiculite. And we have to, I'll let the auditors when they come explain it more, but there's more active documentation that has to be done. Now what we have to do is set up all of our water wells, our septic beds as assets and depreciate them over time. So that's why you're seeing an additional cost here, because there's an accretion expense, it's called, and there's also the landfill closure cost. So that added to it this year. Now, we budget for it, although it's still an unfunded liability because it's been sitting on our books for how many years and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it's best to still budget for it, right? They'll explain it a little more when they come, but that's what that figure is this year.
And then as we move on, and the hydro cost for the little shed that we have. And then as we, like, if I just jump simply to the last one, contracted services, that's kind of the free on freezers. Because someone comes in and then we contract them out to have them certified. The next part is the revenues under the recycling component.
The tax bills.
That's the one, exactly. And then the contracted payment for the recycling itself. So as you see, we took that into consideration, the changeover for the last few months of the year with the 100,000 figure. The next items that we have is some revenues for scrap metals. looking at last year, we were able to get a spike or a peak in the cost of steel. But we're 65, and then the WDO grant, this one is still there, but ultimately will also retire as we move forward. And then we have some on the electronics revenue. That's the WEEE program that we have. And then a bit of a revenue from blue boxes that we have in stock. The next item is purchases. So we're not going to be purchasing new blue boxes as we're going to be retiring maybe a different system. Sultan, there's none, and hazardous waste, that's actually pre-invoiced right now. So it's the contract with the city of North Bay to provide that service to the residents of East Ferris.
In 2024, they doubled the cost of the hazardous waste depot. In fairness, they hadn't increased it in my time here. Like, I think it was like that we've. So they'd be. I would say 8,700 for our residents, 5,000 people to be able to use, or 2,300 households. Hazardous waste depot, it's a good benefit.
Okay.
Just to make a comment or anything else, I'm just watching the news in front of me here, the tariffs are coming on steel, aluminum, any day. How's that going to affect us, cutting edges, steel, repairs, all that?
It's a very interesting and tough question. I mean, even at Good Roads, we've been talking about it. They're trying to see if maybe we can have someone to speak to that. There's a lot of unknowns. There's so many unknowns.
It will affect budgets.
Yeah.
We got a maintenance budget at X amount of dollars, we're going to cut 3%, cutting another %. But what happens? The tariffs do kick in. We start buying cutting edges, start buying plates, and that's a big part of the budget. So it's something to think about, I know we're looking at cutting in certain departments and we're trying to. So I think we should have something in there, because if something does happen, I know we're going to fight for it at AMO, and they're going to be fighting for us and other organizations, but just kind of worried out there. A lot's going to happen. The fuel's going to go up. It's going to go up. It's interesting. It happens now. We're doing our budgets right now, but this happens this week. How are we going to deal with it?
And on scrap metal recycling, we'd be able to make it to generate more income.
Yeah, but in order for us to transport, it's going to cost us 25% tariff. So again.
Yeah, we'd have to look at all the elements.
It would be very hard to evaluate what tariffs, how it affects our budget.
Yeah. Right. And it's the counter tariff that will impact us. Really, it's the Canadian response, and essentially because, Americans will pay the surcharge, but then once we impose the counter tariff, that's when we will be impacted, which is of heavy equipment, certain things.
I guess what I'm saying, there's nothing we can do about today, but we're looking at our budgets, but maybe we should be looking at something that we may have to put something aside in case this happens.
Good point.
Because our roads.
Let's not cut
affected. Pardon?
Let's not cut too much.
That's basically what I'm getting at, because what's going to happen if you don't, and also we got to come back to the drawing board again. And then how do you ask for more money later in the taxes? You can't do it.
Some of the things I thought of when we first, it wasn't a way to cut costs. It was like, where can we shop Canadian? Like there was that whole drivable buying Canadian products, right? And you start looking at things like salt. Who do we purchase our salt from, and where, things like that. Maybe we can do our part, but it's very tough because our procurement bylaw doesn't allow us to shop local or shop Canadian. We also, there's other agreements, I think it's called CEDAR or something like that, that we're part of, right? The construction, purchasing legislation that we've got to follow. So those things start becoming difficult, right? So.
But it is, from what I gather, something you are examining and.
Yeah, like if we can do our part, sure. But in terms of budgeting, in case tariffs come, I would say fuel is probably one of the bigger items that we're hit with. It's different if we were manufacturing something that required steel and aluminum. That, I mean, in the end, there is Canadian steel and aluminum likely being, unless we're buying something manufactured in the state, like we get it. You start looking at big pieces of equipment, things like a fire truck that's going to come up in capital. How is it affected if there's tariffs there? Well, or is it being made? Is it something that crosses the border?
Most of
where the chassis comes in, right? That's the bigger things. The blades for things that we're cutting, I'm not overly concerned because they're not, there's not a lot of them. expense there. You know, it's not like we're spending $100,000 and it's going up by 25%. You know, you might be spending a few $1,000s and it's going up, like, right? Fuel is probably the big one.
Myself personally, I started to work on a resolution to bring to council about buying, a change in our procurement policy to encourage buying Canadian, but with the changing environment, I thought, okay, we need to wait and see, and we need to be in the same direction as our provincial government, and but certainly I think it's something that we will continue to discuss in the months to come
Yeah.
at our council table, and we should be receptive to aligning however we can to our provincial government.
I've been keeping an eye because a lot of the associations send us emails. If it's not daily, it feels like it's weekly. AMO, Good Roads and that. But you've seen, like, the city of Toronto was passing, I believe it was a resolution on what they can do, right? So I'm trying to see if there's not been a lot of communication from smaller municipalities or just say even municipalities. The bigger cities have said something like Mayor Chow and that. But I'm not sure what the other municipalities are going to do in terms of changing procurement bylaw. Is there going to be any change, right? What are we allowed to change?
Yeah,
Like-
well, those are all elements.
Things like that,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So, but you know, whether the tariffs come or not, I think a lot of people are saying, well, we should still be looking at buying Canadian and interprovincial trade, right? So whether tariffs come or not, it's something we may, if we're able to in our procurement bylaw, to say, hey, here's some flexibility we need in terms of buying Canadian and local, right? So.
Further comments, we?
Fire truck that we bought was from Canada.
Yes, that's what I said.
Province beside us.
Yeah.
We have lots of manufacturers in Canada for fire trucks. You can go outside and buy fire trucks in the States.
Yep, that part, but the truck itself comes from the States.
What about the chassis?
The chassis comes from the States. That's all from Illinois.
Yeah, but when we buy them, they're already,
But a tariff on them if they come across.
Yeah, but the trucks are manufactured.
Oh, yeah, the chassis, they come from the States. Any heavy truck.
Yeah, they go back and forth, right?
So that's where the tariff.
And that's where we're really talking. The piece of equipment may go back and forth to the States and Canada through times sometimes.
So interesting times ahead of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's a good comment. Thank you for raising it. Okay.
No other questions? We'll get into capital.
Well, yeah, exactly. There we go.
So there's two separate pages, that you have the summary for draft 2025 capital budget.
Yeah.
And also submitted to assist a little bit in a better visual.
Yeah. The one at the back of your binder in the sleeve is the total of, like, summary of all of capital. Antoine's projects are all listed in there as well, but you might want to just refer to it.
So in the order presented, the first one we have is essentially a completion of road. What you can see on the schematic, it's the in black, the black line, which is basically kind of showing you the section of that was completed last year. And the red section is what we're proposing to finish this year. There's approximately 1,400 meters of road to be finished to get to the Battery of Chisholm. It's also going to include the single overlay of the overall at the end. And for that, like, we were projecting a 362,500.
As of now, like, we've got funding available to cover GRU completely. There's nothing coming from pay as you go or reserves or anything like that.
Have you got your tankers ready for that already?
Well, it's gonna be very similar to last year's tender. So what we're gonna change is the quantities and so forth. So I don't believe it. They're not done, but they won't take long to do.
Just thinking getting your prices.
As soon as budgets pass, like, Antoine can change his figures and get it out relatively quickly. All items really, winter sand can go out, GRU Road can go out. The only, even if you look at one of the next ones, Village Road, we've got tenders from the past that could just be changed and they could be tendered fairly quick.
Again, I'm going back to.
Yeah.
25% tariff. Like,
Yeah.
the price is
Yeah.
guaranteed now before they get.
So the next one that we have is the section of Village Road. As you see, there's some sections that will be addressed in the future. But the section we're focusing on right now is the part south of Catherine. So there's about 500 meters long. And then we're projecting a cost to mill and overlay of 203,000. Last year or 2 years ago, when we did Catherine, we kind of teed into Village Road. So the section in between what the black line and the white and the green, red, is decent, in good shape.
Bring us past them there?
Yes.
I think so. I believe it's just slightly past it, and then eventually there's a different dash line if you want to see on the south, because eventually that second portion is a surface treatment, so different type of road. But yes, I do believe it goes just fairly south of the cemetery.
Downhill, and because there is a bad spot there.
Yeah.
The amount that we've shown is based on the 500 meters, so I can double check to make sure, but I do believe it goes past.
Might as well capture that.
Yeah.
That's what I think that it's well done.
Next, what we have is item number 3, which is kind of representing the gravel roads. Gravel roads, we have the Trout Lake. Just a little note, we have a 5-year program where we're trying to go back to the roads after a 5-year cycle. So in this case, this year would be the 6th year, so we're following that program. The sections of roads that are identified is approximately 5,000 tons of granular A that we would be placing. I didn't put a street name on the map, but these are kind of the ones from the legend above that we would target. And like anything else too, this is also important to try to do before calcium. So we're, want to basically push and then start this prior to the late May, early June, so that we can actually apply calcium following the gravel. The next page, we have just a little bit more descriptive on the pictures. It's a smaller item in the cost, if you think of it, but it still falls under capital. There's been a little bit of what we call spalling and undermining. This is the Bailey Bridge. It's a single lane bridge. It's the one that's on Edmund West, and it services 2 properties, 2 farms, kind of residential farm on the other side. So it would be just simply ensure that we have a good concrete, and this would be mostly done in-house, but we would be purchasing materials, concrete and so forth. The item number 5 under bridge was identified. Those 2 actually were identified under the OSIM inspection, which is the biannual inspection that we do. But in this case, this one kind of ties in well with Gru Road because we're reconstructing the road. And the seals were identified to be replaced past their life, essentially. There's a section that you see on the second picture a little bit that the metal has been damaged and could potentially uplift when we would be plowing. So this is identifying the cost. We haven't done any major, other than guide rails, investment on this bridge, which was built in 1984.
It's good to have the photograph as well so we can see them.
So what do you think about doing grind this slides out and then refurnish it?
This would be contracted out. Exactly which method they're going to use. It probably will be like that because they have to get into the seal and replace what's there. So I would say so, yes. And the cost value is also pulled from the OSIM report. So it's a general figure that we establish. I think they had a 42 some figure, but I'm using a 45 to be safe.
It's going to be covered under our grant money as well. Everything except for 2 pieces of equipment we're going to discuss soon is covered. Over work, road work, we've got enough money in grants.
So item 6 that we have is something we discussed last year, but we were not able to proceed with it because we kind of basically dealt with the large culvert that we replaced near the trestle instead. So this year we're proposing to get caught up a little bit on our worst culverts. It's kind of a little bit of staged work because we've already purchased some of the culverts and we would do some of the cleanup work, but they would require like a relining process. So how many exactly are we able to capture? I'll certainly push to do as much as we can. But these are essentially kind of on the hardtop sections. If you look, the summary down below is what was highlighted or reported based on the conditions of the culverts from the report that was the culvert condition report. And on the next page, you have a little bit of a kind of a mapping that gives you in red dot the one that were identified on the first image as the worst ones. But if I point like just to that, there's a little we have Duga to the north and we have Eglinton. Those two culverts are, first of all, either on gravel or very shallow, so we would do an excavation. So I can't explain which ones exactly we're doing, but it's mainly like the reline would be the ones that are deeper and under pavement. But if you look at, for instance, on the chart that's a little bit in better condition, 3 to 5 years in yellow, there's many of them that are on gravel roads, and then those will be captured under the operation. We're going to try to tackle as many as we can this year. But these are the 75 is for a reline, where we would prep and do as much in-house as possible. The next two items is basically falling under fleet. We've kept the 3/4 ton pickup truck. In this case, we would be looking at replacing the 2017, so just slightly over 7 years old now. And we're basically at 142,000 kilometers. The cost to replace is evaluated at 69 some minus the 5,000 and so for the resale that we've established. And then we have to install the back rack radio and so forth. So when we do the overall costs, it's shown as a 67 for us, our in-house cost. Justification, well, it's mostly that the truck is outgrown the use in a sense that with the fuel tank, there's excessive wear on it. And then there's also a very limited use of the box because it's a short box. So with the tank, we're losing almost 2 feet. I think we have almost 4 feet of box. So the longer box with the fuel tank would give us a normal use of the box as well.
You've got some prices on this, right?
This is the numbers we received, the costing we received, yes. So it's actually based on actuals, projected cost. So that's for the fleet. And then the second item is an item that's a bit new this year, but it refers to a dump trailer. So we haven't really discussed this before, but the use of a dump trailer would be really handy, practical. It's kind of, I'm thinking of the health and safety of the workers in a sense. Something where we would use quite a lot, like with cold mix repairs, where we could also store the asphalt in-house, like inside the building, I mean, so it stays warm. And then we can go out and then work with it. We've every so often we deal with the trees and then the roadkill. And it's essentially to facilitate some of the work that we do. And those are estimates that we receive for the cost of that trailer. And that's
Trailers?
say that again, sorry.
Trailer?
Yeah, this is what we've been looking at right now. Like aluminum is the one we priced. It's kind of beneficial. It could, if you're very rough on it, it could be breaking, I guess. But with the amount of work we do, we're not really a contractor. So I think we would be able to have a vehicle like that would last a long time.
And not the hyper again, but that's Canadian made.
I would assume so. I don't know.
Budgets of capital.
But this is all it's all grant money, right?
So everything's grant money except the pickup truck and dump trailer.
There's no grant money for that.
So I budgeted for is the cash for the other.
Good work.
Bring it to completion for that presentation. So moving on to. Okay, thank you.
Next meeting.
We're gaining time, Greg.
It'll be here by.
You don't really back.
Let's do planning. For facilities, because we're not gonna make it through. Lunch is gonna be here. So if we can turn our pages to, you'll see category 800 to 820.
Pages that?
Just turn it a few pages. It'll be after category 700 to 740.
Planning, okay, so.
We're gonna do planning and ECDF first.
Okay.
Because she's on her way back with lunch. So let's get planning over the way, and instead of getting into rec and then having to break.
Yeah, take a break, fair.
Yeah. So if we can turn to 800 to 820 is the category on the top. On that page.
The general operating planning department. We'll show it right here. That's community emergency service. Go back. There it is. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to proceed.
Great, sounds good, thank you. Okay, so I'll go through planning and active operating budget right now. Largely, it has remained pretty consistent from last year, with the exception of a few key things that are kind of driving the increases. So I'll get through those as we go, but starting the first section, so we get some revenues every year from septic compliance certificates and short-term rental licensing. Short-term rental licensing has been kind of up and down. We've only had 2 so far this year, but do anticipate receiving a couple more. So that is why we've settled at 3750 there. Moving on to the expenditures. So general department expenditures for planning. This is primarily dictated by the pay equity study we did. So this is all of our wages and accessory costs. That takes us to about halfway down the expenditures section. Just touching on some of the bigger ones. So there's a few very small costs for various office related things. The first one that has a bit of a change is computer software. So computer software listed at $1,100. The reason why this is doubled is this year I'd like to get a subscription for TerraView. It's a registration software that allows us to register our own like agreements and plans and things at the registry office. That will save us money in the long run by not having to pay someone else to register site plan control agreements and any other things like that. Then CGIS is always the big one in this section. It has marginal increases every year.
Our agreement dictates CPI.
Yeah, and it's a critical system that we need. We did try to shave a little bit off of the consulting section, so we dropped that down to 1,500. In past years, when there's been significant amounts, when you see the 2022, 2023, in particular actuals, those have always been driven by some specific project. And we don't see anything coming up this year, and there's nothing planned that would put anything in that column.
Were mostly related to the
Trout Lake study. Yeah.
North Bay, we had a contribution there.
Okay, so then going on to training and education budget. So the training and education budget is up a little bit this year, and that's partially because of the courses at Western, but also partially because I haven't attended the OPPI conference in quite a few years. And this year is the first year that OPPI is merging the conference with Canadian Institute. So I thought it'd be a good year to attend just because it's a new format. It's kind of like a whole new kind of approach to it. So that's why we're up there.
Is that a little bit of your registration to pursue a higher, further education? Is that, do you want to mention?
Sure. So Greg's currently doing the GDPA program at Western, which is the
Graduate diploma
in municipal administration. So it's a bit of a step to a master's in public administration. All online. The 4 courses is what it's for, and you've done 2.
I've completed 2 last semester, and I'm in the middle of 2 right now.
So the 4 are all online. That's why some of the council meetings are coming in later.
Yes.
Same time as the council meeting, basically. And then his next goal is to go on with the MPA program, course by course.
So how does that really help out the municipality? Just
Succession. Succession is always essential. It's an essential. I know that.
I'm just wondering, I'm just curious, like, how does that really help us out? Like,
Yeah,
it's good. Trust me.
to be more attention, but as well, Greg and I have had a conversation where he's contributing to some of the costs.
Cool.
So it's not 100%. Yeah.
Okay, next section is our official plan section. So we really never have a lot of expenditure here. Most of that type of printing, advertising, et cetera, is all captured under other areas in the department. So onto our zoning bylaw. So our zoning bylaw, we budget similar amounts for amendments every year. We haven't received any yet, but we usually get 1 or 2 a year. So that's why we have 3,000 listed. They're 1,500 per application. And then the next one, expenditures. So this is one where you can see we've basically had zero across the board year to year. We've always budgeted a bit the last few years in the legal fees category. And this is in anticipation of us potentially having legal fees related to dwelling policies if they get passed this year. The intention is to have open houses and bring draft policies within the next couple of months, just once we're able to coordinate with North Bay on getting them moving forward. We think it's very likely, let's say, that there could be a legal challenge to these policies, and as a result, we will probably have OLT expenses. So we've budgeted for this in the past years, but you can see the actuals are zero because the policies weren't passed. So we budgeted $7,500 for that. Going on to applications, the application fees, I mean, we've been pretty steady the past few years. We get a pretty consistent amount of severance applications, minor variance applications, et cetera. So I've kept things pretty consistent. I mean, there's no sign of us slowing down or speeding up. It's just fairly steady. Then on to the next page, this is the expenditures. I've really been trying to be very lean with our legal and consulting fees. I never incur a lot of legal fees most years, but just to try to keep costs reasonable, I've dropped the consulting fees a little bit. We don't usually run into a lot of need for any type of like secondary review or anything like that associated with our applications. The per diem pay in the next section for PAC and C of A, this is pretty standard. It's usually around 2,000, give or take a small amount every year. And I guess I'll take a quick break because that's the end of planning before we talk about economic development. Is there any questions about the planning department budget? Okay. So economic development, there's a few key things to point out. The first one, federal conditional funding. So this is the funding we received from FedNor for the expenses related to having Connor with us. So this is 90% funded through FedNor, and they're covering all of his, or 90% of wages and associated costs related to training and those type of ancillary things. The trade show booth and trade show sponsorship. We hope that will be very similar this year. I mean, more would be better, but we've kept those revenues consistent with last year's trade show. Speaking of trade show, 10th annual this year, so we're looking for a good one.
Planning is underway.
Yes, planning is underway. We've had a couple meetings already, and things are on track.
There's in 2 weeks, I think.
It's always sooner than ours. The garden show?
Yeah.
Bring us in the air.
Okay, so expenditures. So the salaries and wages for the expenditures, you'll see that's slightly higher than the conditional funding amount, and that's because we have a small component that we need to put in. Going down the line, so there's two other things that I'll touch on here. Trade show costs, I've bumped it up 5,000 from last year. Partially just because of increasing costs of things, but partially because it is our 10th annual. So we may want to do 1 or 2 little extra things just to be a little bit bigger and better than past years. So that's the reason for the $5,000 increase in cost there. And then 2 lines down from that, other active initiatives. There's 20,000 here, and you'll see that there was very little expense in past years. So this is directly related to a resolution that was passed by council last year about our lands on Durland Road. So Eglinton Road South and Durland, where they kind of split, the municipality has our land holding of about 8.5 acres there. And this is the one where we looked at last year at council with multiple potential configurations for future projects. So we know that the surveying costs and the legal costs to make that consolidation happen will be about $20,000. And that's currently in progress.
That's more of an investment than a cost because, if we attract businesses and just the land, you get the money back, but it's the cost that has to go into doing all the work.
It's sitting empty for 40, 50 years.
Yeah. It's quite a bit of work there being an old subdivision. They have closed roads. They've got to ruin all the pieces of property. So there's lots involved with that. But like I said, you pay this now and you get it back later.
Under the new rent program or I guess they can call Unite Navy.
Yeah.
Would some of these costs be eligible under such a program for,
The issue would likely be that it's already started.
okay,
Like a lot of the funding from the province, you put your application in and then some of them say, as soon as you put your application in, you can start incurring costs.
that's true.
Some you can't incur anything until the approval date. So NOHFC is one that once you submit the application, you can start incurring costs. Some of them don't allow that though. So.
And we've incurred like some legal monitoring on this, like Sandra's been working.
It's been a complicated one, yeah, because of the old plan of subdivision that was registered, so we've been working on this for almost a year, probably, just back and forth between survey crews being out there, registration processes through the lawyer's office, so it's been ongoing.
Some things that though, like Mayor Rochford, that might be covered is like, we're ready to go. We might be able to put in for, I don't know, a hydro G study or things that we're not doing now.
Mhm.
To say, okay, well, we want this to be marketable. Be able to tell somebody like, this is where the water is, this is, you know, there might be other studies. We did this before. We thought studies before, like that, we're gonna do Chelsea, right? But because of consolidation, we handed off to the lawyer on it. It started, I'm sure that piece.
I know
Yeah.
these projects under that new program, so just highlighted, yeah, but that's excellent, okay, thanks.
Okay, and that brings it to the end. So looking at the changes to budget, I mean, primarily it's driven by, I guess, four things. So the slight increase in trade show costs, the money we put aside for the OLT funding, if required, pay equity increases, and our wages for the 10% we have for Connor. And then the big one is the $20,000 for Durland Road.
Yeah, we're about 35,000 increase on what Greg's mentioned. For entirely for ECDEV and finance.
Yeah, and just over 30,000 of that is the legal trade show in Durland, so.
The community improvement program, the grant program, are we okay on that? If we
We've
get-
not put any money in the budget to cover anything.
So if someone was to come forward,
Yeah.
that could be something we would, but that could be part of our red application, or a new, I need to get the acronyms for the new name.
I still call that because you know, it's best if they just leave the programs called the same because it's identical, lots of the eligibility, just call it the same. Call it red part 2 or 2.0, whatever, but it is, yeah.
So that would be an element to include under that program.
So, well, that's the reason we're doing the Did You Know Why campaign with CIP right now is to try to see if we can gain some traction on it because if you look at in the past, the CIP was a big project to get done. It had to be approved at the ministry level. Lots of work, but we're not getting the traction from businesses to go ahead and invest, right? So we're trying to another kick at it, although in this budget, we've not funded anything.
But as we explore that program, there might be opportunities for us to modify what our CIP program, well, yeah, what it is, what we're offering, yeah.
Some of the program, like one of the vouchers, I guess I would say, or categories under CIP is tax deferral. We don't really have to budget for that. If something's done this year, the tax deferral starts next year. Right? So, and that's what we've seen mostly in the past is the tax deferral piece. But that's an addition. So if somebody's got a building right now that's assessed at 100,000 and they put an addition on it for, you know, $40,000, well, then the 40,000 is what you're getting your tax deferral on, not your original 100. That's how the tax deferral starts and it would be for next year, right? So there's no cost to budget for that.
No, exactly.
It just means that we have less taxation revenue next year. So
you don't see a lot of uptake like fiscal programs, and that's partially because of they're down to the core, whereas it has a traditional downtown. People wanted to improve their storefronts that just don't have as much.
Yeah. And one of those programs, if someone does come forward with an application, it's capped at $1,500. So if there was one to come in, 1,500, we can find it somewhere in the budget.
Not dangerous.
Yeah. Is lunch here?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, we're going to break for 20 minutes for lunch, half an hour.